Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. I'm your host, Uncivil Law, a licensed attorney in Texas, Virginia, and before the United States Supreme Court. And we are here with your continuing coverage of the Scott Peterson trial out of Florida. Scott Peterson is a licensed, badged, sworn law enforcement officer. It's his duty station happened to be this school. That was where he was assigned to be, as opposed to being a patrol person, as opposed to walking a beat, as opposed to whatever else, but otherwise just a police officer. He was an employee of the sheriff's office and he worked at the school. That was his duty station. There was a school shooting occurring on February the 14th, 2018, during which 17 people died, 14 students and 3 adults, 17 others were injured. And the allegation has been that Scott Peterson did nothing. We've heard tell that Scott Peterson essentially hid behind a car for 40 minutes, but we haven't seen any tape about that. And the evidence that we've had has only been segments in time. So I'm not sure if there is a tape, but the state seemed, at least to my mind, to promise more than they've delivered, which is always a problem. The state seemed to say, okay, this guy was cowering behind a car, in this fortified position for 40 minutes and did nothing during that time. And I assumed that we would have a tape or other evidence that would demonstrate that. And it seems that that doesn't exist because the state is supposed to rest its case today. So unless there's a tape that's going to come into evidence today, the evidence against him is more circumstantial and inferential in nature. I think the state overpromised a little bit, and they overpromised in their opening and overpromised in their questioning, because I think they implied that they had more than they did. And so the state's case is a little bit weak as to what Scott Peterson did. We have segments of time, but we don't appear to have anything that shows a contemporaneous haul. And there's a lot of ground between the two, in my humble opinion. Assuming that Scott Peterson in fact did nothing, which is at this point just an inference based on scattered plots, then we get into the question of Scott Peterson's duty. He's being charged as a caretaker, which doesn't seem to really work under the relevant statute. Although teachers have been held to be caretakers, teachers, of course, are employees of the school. The sheriff is not. He is just a guy walking a beat. It's just his beat happens to be the school, which is huge. It's 45 acres, 3,000 students. The size of the school is multiple football fields long and wide with multiple story buildings. It is a huge campus. And so we don't really seem to know what he was doing. And also, of course, the structures themselves are concrete, so that creates a lot of echo. Plus, there was the noise of the fire alarm that was going off, which hid the noise. Plus, he seems to be the only person that was there while the shooting was occurring. We don't seem to have any testimony of anyone else who was there during the shooting. If anyone was there at all, it was only like literally in the very, very last seconds of the shooting at best. But it seems like he was alone. So he can't be everywhere at once, obviously. He can't do everything at once. And so the question is, what was he doing? And was he behaving in a reasonable way under the circumstances? So, and then of course, the fact that he has a duty at all is questionable at best. So that's where we're sitting on this thing. And we expect the state to rest its case today. And then we'll see what's going on. So good morning, fam. How are you guys doing? I'm having a great day. We're just waiting to see this trial get underway and the state rest its case. And right now, the state's case, I believe they've overpromised. So that is where we're sitting on all that. Good times. Good morning, Sandra and Crestel and Starlight and Thomas. Safe Life is coming to fix your windshield. Safe Light repair, Safe Light replace, baby. You know it. Got to get them in there. Tony P, Starlight, Joe, Connie, Sandra, Kestrel, Starlight, Tony, Thomas, all you guys, great you're here. Yeah, I heard rumors of them banging on the side of the submersible. I don't know about that. I'm going with they're all dead. That is my bet. My bet is they're all dead. So we'll see. What was it where they were banging on the side of the ship that was sunk and they didn't do anything about it? It was Hawaii, I think, or Pacific at least. Was it USS Iowa? Hmm. But that did happen. Was it a submarine? It must have been. Or no, maybe it wasn't a submarine, but it was some ship that was sunk and the crew was trapped in the ship and the Navy knew about it and they heard the banging and they didn't try to like rescue them and they basically died of lack of air / starvation / whatever. USS Arizona and Pearl Harbor. There you go. So I was close-ish. At least I knew it was a state. No, not Russian sub. This was American. The Russian sub also happened. This incident I'm thinking about is American. So USS Arizona. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Yeah. One of those incidents that make you wonder, if they made the right call. There was the Navy, I believe their official statement on the issue was that they were concerned about hitting like oil reserves.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Thank you. Watch your back as those seats. You may be seated. All the parties may be seated.
Sound like someone was keeping basically hash marks on like a calendar or something. And they basically slowly suffocated / starved to death. So yeah, court feed, I know, I see it. I'm just letting them get settled.
I hope you had a nice evening last night. When we press pause on the trial yesterday, we were in the middle of the state's
And the audio is absolute garbage.
State, when you are ready, you may call your next witness.
Dude, I can't share this audio. This audio is so bad, I can't share this audio. This is absolute garbage audio. We're all gonna suffer horribly if I share this audio. Let me see if I can find a different audio source. So yes, the trial has started, but I'm gonna see if I can find a different audio source because this is so garbage that I can't let this go forward. Because I don't want your ears to bleed. Let's see if Law and Crime has any better audio than this. It's not usually a great sign, but we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it was coming out of tin can. It was really bad. It was really bad. So I was like, no. You would think that Law and Crime and all those guys would have some little post-processing. You could just get yourself a basic sound mixer and do some basic stuff with compression and stuff like that. There's obviously soundboards that have built-in compression and stuff like that, and they're not necessarily very expensive. You could have a small portable one if you needed to. Run it through some audio filters or something, make it not complete garbage. Okay, now we've gone from garbage audio to basically no audio. All right, we're going to share this and hope for the best. I don't promise any results here. This is going to be a rough morning, I can tell.
My name is John Curcio. I work currently for the Broward Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked for the Broward Sheriff's Office?
2009, I started with the Sheriff's Office.
Give the jury a little background on what you did before 2009.
If you're saying to yourselves, I can't hear the court audio, don't worry, I can't either.
I retired from them in 2009. I did 13 years as a homicide detective for the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. 10 days after I retired, I joined the Sheriff's Office, where I've been a homicide detective with them, other than the original, I think, 10 or 11 months.
Can we make it louder? No.
So I did uniform, and then I went back to working homicides for the Sheriff's Office.
When you say they wanted to see you in uniform, do you mean that after retiring as a homicide detective, you went back to the road?
No.
Yes, for the Sheriff's Office, I worked for the City of Lauderdale Lakes as a uniformed officer. It was just part of BSO's standard protocol that when you were a new employee, you had to do some time in uniform.
Once you completed your time on the road, did you go straight into, I don't know if you refer to it as a detective bureau?
Yes, I went straight to becoming a homicide detective for the sheriff's office.
Now, over your time as a detective handling homicides, if you know approximately how many homicides have you handled?
Well, I mean, I've handled hundreds
Again,
of homicides.
I
but
mean,
we do other things than
I wouldn't
homicides.
imagine it would be that hard
Unattended deaths, which could be
for a
an
major
accidental
company
death,
like Law and Crime,
suicide,
which is a fairly substantial company. You know, they're not
thousands of
exactly
those types of events.
running their network
Several hundred homicides.
on wishes and dreams, which is more true of me. And I could make the audio better with a little bit of effort. I
Well,
mean, I'd have
normally
to
we,
run
at
it
the
through
sheriff's
a,
office, we're a
I have to
team.
run
We
it
have
maybe
a
through
two-man team
OBS
that
and get
run
myself
calls
some
for
sort of
periods
virtual
of,
plugin and
2
then
weeks at a time.
create a virtual audio
Unless you
input to make it
get
work.
involved in
I
a
could
homicide
do it.
investigation, then you're
I mean, I
taking
can't do it
all the
right this
calls for
second,
that.
but you know, at least in
During that
principle, I
2-week
could
period
do
of
it.
time, you handle all the rest of
Or I
the
could get myself a
death
hardware device
investigations
and
that I've
run it through
described.
that way and export the audio or something and run it through some sort of hardware folder with a,
Back in
you know, fancy
2013, you were
soundboard.
a homicide detective, correct?
Yes.
And Law and Crime over here can't make it
Explain for the
work.
jury what your connection
Exciting.
is to the MSD case as it relates to your role as a homicide detective.
I was the lead detective assigned that investigation.
As the lead detective, who were you investigating?
Well, we charged Nicholas Cruz with that particular incident.
Did you respond to the school on February 14th?
Yes, I did.
Are they perhaps doing the best they can? I doubt that very much. Why don't they just get their own microphone on their camera?
5 or 6 homicide detectives.
Get their own
in
audio
our,
source.
Homicide squad room, which is at
You
2601
know,
West Broward.
get a boom mic or
One of our
something.
lieutenant
No, not a
colonels
boom mic.
kind
Get
of
a
came
shotgun
running
mic.
into the squad room and said there was
Put
a
it on
shooting
the
up at
camera
school.
and point it at the
You know,
witness.
all the homicide detectives that were in the squad room
How about that?
ran down to our cars, jumped in our cars, put on our lights and sirens, and responded up the turnpike to Stoneman Douglas.
It won't be movie quality. It won't be movie set audio with a shotgun mic from that much
Without looking at the
distance,
actual
but you know,
timeline, I know we got
it'll be
to
better
the
than this
scene
bullshit.
right around the same time that the Broward Sheriff's Office SWAT team was starting to make entry into the west side of the 1200 building. So I'd have to look at the timeline. We got up there relatively quickly because we were able to park right alongside of the 1200 building on the east roadway. And after a few minutes, there were so many cars up there, you couldn't park within miles of the school.
And the reason I ask, when you're responding to the scene, what's your understanding as to whether it's an active scene or?
Well, again, all we knew was that when the lieutenant colonel kind of told us what was going on, that there was
Yeah, lowering my voice
somebody
volume is
that
something I
shot,
could do, but then
and we didn't know much
that
more
becomes a
of
whole nightmare trying to match myself to the
I was
core
in my
audio.
car separately as we're going on the turnpike, you know, as fast as we could. So there wasn't a lot of information that we knew other than what the lieutenant colonel.
I guess. All right, I'll lower my voice volume for you guys so that you can imagine on your
What
send.
you took
I'm a
as
good
far
on
as
civil.
responding to the scene? Was there a specific
Lord.
approach because of the term active shooter?
All right, now
Well,
I'm at
again, when we got to
20%,
the scene, we
so
were able to park the group
probably
of,
not low enough. I
homicide
probably have to go
detectives
lower
I'm
than that, to be
describing on the
honest.
east side, and there were hundreds of students self-evacuating the
closer.
school when we got there. They were coming off every exit point they could, and as we were coming out of our cars, we were trying to gather intelligence or information as to what was going on campus from them as they were running by us. We were making them drop their backpacks, and we were trying to get some intelligence information as to what actually was
I was
going
seeing
on.
that Law and Crime
So
had like
that's why
1,000
in that
people or
moment when you're
1,200 people
arriving
waiting
to the
for
scene of the
this
shooting, you would stop and
YNM
talk to
RAF
children.
murder trial thing.
Well, again, I didn't have any idea really what was
So
going
maybe I
on
picked
at
the wrong
school at that
horse
point.
on,
So you're trying to gain
picking which
information
trial.
so you know what to do as a police officer.
Is there any active shooting going on while you're doing this?
No, there was no gunshots going off, just all the kids
Oh, well.
self-evacuating.
Did the lack of gunshots impact your response at all?
Well, when you respond on any scene, whether it's an active shooter or anything in police work, you're trying to gather intelligence as to what you're dealing with. So when you're not hearing the shots, you're still trying to gather intelligence from the students. Where is something happening? What did you see? What did you hear? You know, to react to what you're going to do.
And if you were hearing shots, what does your training dictate that would change?
You're supposed to go towards the shots to find out, investigate what's going on.
Is that true for a domestic or any scene?
Yes.
When you stopped those children and spoke to them, were you able to gather any information?
Just a kind
No, none of
reminder
the
to
kids
everyone to
had
please
any
get in
information. We
the
kind of, again, we asked them to
let's try that again.
go, there was a berm on the road.
Please retweet
further
the pinned
east to all
comment.
sit down over
New
there.
pinned
And
comment this
while we
morning.
were
As always,
talking
trying to get
the-
attention
again,
to the channel.
Groups that were just
Little
filing
organic
out of the
promotion. It
school,
does make a big
other
difference.
detectives
Thank
were
you
kinda
for
like
everyone who helps.
still questioning the groups that were sitting on the berm, and no one had any information as to what was going on the campus.
While this is happening, you explained that SWAT had already arrived, correct?
Yes.
And so was there a significant
Thank you,
officer
Samantha.
presence already working?
I was having
with
trouble
that
finding the
building?
court feed this
Well,
morning.
I could only see SWAT on the west side. I didn't, when we first got there, I didn't know
Long
who
crime
was
didn't
in
have their
1200
scheduled for a
building
long
at that
time.
point. I
Recovery
just knew they
addict.
were on the
was kind enough
west
to
side doors.
let me know what source he
starting
was
to make
using so that I
entrance.
could
So, yeah, there was
get the stream
police
started.
presence, but, I can't.
It's like,
we
I
could
don't
only
want to
see what
schedule
was
the
on
stream until I
east
know
side,
exactly what time it's supposed to
along
start. I
the
was having
1200
trouble finding
building
the
down to
feed.
the bus saloon.
Long
I couldn't
crime didn't
tell what
schedule
was on
it
the
in
west side
advance,
because
so.
the buildings blocked our view.
What happens next?
Drama in my morning.
At
It's
one
always
point,
something I
while
swear.
we're on that site, again, still trying to interview all these students coming off, there was a radio communication.
Hey, Goes to
that I
Recon. It's been a
heard
while since I've seen
from
your name
another
in the chat
detective's
too.
radio,
Nice to see you again. I hope you've
from
been well.
somebody in the video room saying that the shooter was coming down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor of the 1200 building. And then there was a pause, and then eventually we realized that somebody was looking at the video from 20 minutes earlier and describing what they had seen in the building 20 minutes earlier. So it was not real-time information.
What happens when you realize that information is lagged?
Again, we're still doing the same thing, trying to gather intelligence from the kids coming off campus. Shortly thereafter, somebody came up with the name of the suspect and put it over the radio, so now we're actually
Well, Goes to Recon. Keep kicking ass.
re-engaging with
In
the
your
students who
divorce
came
and
off
fighting the
campus who
VA.
were
I
sitting
hear
on the berm or
tell
coming
about the
off.
VA.
Anybody
I
know
don't
what
have
Nicholas
personal
Cruz looks
experience,
like?
but
We had no idea.
you know,
He
I
could have been in
certainly
the
hear
group we
tell
had,
us everyone does about the VA,
separated
and then
on the
not
berm.
necessarily
So at
always
some point,
helping
it
our
does become
troops.
known to the
despite
officers
a
on scene
massive
that the shooter
budget.
has left the building.
The VA's
We-
budget is
they knew
huge.
that the
They
video
still can't
feed
seem to take care of our
was 20
troops
minutes
properly.
earlier, he had left the 1200 building, but
Which is a
they didn't know he
disgrace.
had left the campus. I don't
Sometimes I
think.
wonder
But they
whether
knew he
the
left
VA should
1200
exist
building,
at
they
all.
didn't see that.
Like,
When
there's
you
got to be a
realize that the
better way to
shooter
go
has left
about
the
this
building,
somehow.
As a detective that's going to be handling homicide,
Anyways.
this specific homicide, what is your role in that moment?
Well, again, my moment, we're still doing all the things we've been doing since the moment we stepped up there. But now I'm talking to students, I'm on my phone, trying to get on social media, trying to come up with a picture of Nicholas Cruz. I'm trying to get any of the students who know him to provide me a picture so we know what this guy looks like. And then one of the assistant principals who's kind of in this, this mass of students, hears the name and says, I know what Nicholas Cruz looks like because I had done a threat assessment with him at the school. And that was Denise Reed.
Was Denise Reed able to provide you with a photograph?
She was trying to get it through ROTC, I believe, again, through the school radio communication system. And then we heard over the radio that he had been stopped. So Denise Reed got in a car with homicide detective Zach Scott and myself and Zach Scott in separate vehicles started heading down to the location where Nicholas Cruz had been detained.
How far from the school was Nicholas Cruz detained?
Several miles. He was down in Coral Springs in a residential area.
Was the route that he took when he left the campus learned?
Eventually, as the investigation proceeded, he went westbound through the school grounds. He blended in with the other students, self-evacuating, ended up in the Walmart, which is just west of the school. Then he traveled down to a McDonald's, which is just southwest of the school, and then eventually into the residential area where he was detained.
I
Was it
will
learned
be right
which
back,
side of
guys.
The 1200 building he exited.
Yeah, he exited the west side, with the west doors.
Once the shooter was detained, did you respond to the area that he was being held?
I attempted to, but again, by the time all this is occurring, the traffic was it was incredible because you had every law enforcement, paramedic, fire department, family members all heading to the school, plus you had normal rush hour traffic. I never got down there before they ended up transferring him up to Broward Medical North to be medically cleared. So I kind of like diverted halfway down to where he was detained to get to the hospital, which was where he was being brought to.
All right, I know this investigation was very vast, so I'm going to streamline it a bit, but did you ultimately interview the shooter?
Yes, I did.
Explain for the members of the jury, just generally, approximately how long you spoke with the shooter, not what the contents of that conversation.
I spoke to him for several hours, but I was with him probably for, and again, I'd have to look at my notes, anywhere between 10 and 12 hours before I ended up actually formally booking him on a probable cause charge.
As the lead detective on this case, explain what your role would be as far as walking the crime scene. Is that something you ever did in this case?
Yes. After we formally booked him and he was brought to the jail, I ended up going up to the crime scene where the other homicide detectives had remained from the time that myself and Zach Scott left to go where he had been, originally stopped.
Did you familiarize yourself with the campus and with the 1200 building?
Yes.
Approximately how many hours or days initially in this investigation did you spend on that campus, having walked the campus?
Well, I mean, we did the walkthrough over the course of the years that this investigation took against Nicholas Cruz several times. More so was the video that we watched and ended up reviewing more times than we did walkthroughs, at least myself.
Are you familiar then with the surveillance system at the school?
Yes.
You're familiar with where certain cameras are placed and located?
Yes.
And you familiarize yourself with the location of the particular in the 1200 building as to where the camera angle is looking at?
Yes.
Now, as part of your investigation, did you learn the names of the victims that were located on each individual floor?
Yes, I did.
Explain for the members of the jury how that happened in those first hours or days.
All right, when I was actually at the public safety building with the suspect, again, a team of homicide detectives remained on the scene. And they were the ones who physically were able to identify each of the victims, which took a period of time because, again, some of the students didn't have identification on them, and it took several hours for us to get their true names.
And I don't mean to be crass when I say this, but by the time you walked the first floor and the third floor, had the deceased been removed?
Yes, all the victims had been removed by the time I got up there.
Was it part of your job as understanding the crime scene to know, nevertheless, where each victim had died?
Yeah, I walked through with the detectives who were on the scene. The video itself actually showed a clearer portrayal of where they were when they passed, because once the entry teams began to come in to try to rescue the kids in the classrooms, the living kids, some of the victims' deceased bodies had to be moved away from doorways so that entry could be made. So not only did I speak to the detectives who were on the scene who found, saw and found where the victims had been moved to, we watched the video where you could tell where they actually fell before they were moved.
And after watching that video, you yourself walked and were able to physically stand in the location where those individuals had been shot or killed, correct?
Yes, several times.
I'd like to focus on the first floor. If you could describe to the members of the jury just briefly the names of the individuals that were killed on the first floor.
All right, the deceased on the first floor.
I'm going to object this to relevance since my client was on the scene at that point.
The relevance is?
Well, Judge, the relevance is just the order of operation, the timeline that took place, where his client was at what time is pretty relevant.
Over the defense objection. Go ahead, sir. That's overruled. You can answer the question.
All right, the first floor, coming in through the east side of the 1200 building, first floor, you had Gina Maltalto, Martin Duque, Luke Hoyer. A little further into the first floor was Alex Schachter, Alyssa Altadef, Helena Ramsey, Nicholas Dorette, Carmen Shentra, Christopher Hickson, which was a staff member, and Aaron Feiss, who was a staff member.
And did you, if I didn't hear, did you say Elena Petty?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Elena Petty.
Now,
I apologize for that.
and as far as processing the crime scene, was there a crime scene tech that was assigned to collect the shell casings and ensure that the scene was properly processed?
Yeah, there was numerous crime scene people at the school. Each one, as if I recall correctly, there was teams on each floor assigned to each floor.
And as the lead detective, are you involved in making sure that that happens in the investigation?
Yeah, I mean they're all they all have their own supervisors, but ultimately the homicide lead detective is responsible to make sure everything's done properly.
Were you responsible for also, and we won't go through each individual's name, but were you responsible for also learning the names of those who were wounded but not deceased?
Yes,
And were there several on the first floor?
there was numerous on the first floor, yes.
As part of your investigation, did you learn whether any rounds have been shot on the second floor?
Yes, when we were able to not only do the physical examination of the second floor, but watching the video as well. On the second floor, there were several classrooms that were shot into.
And let me back up. Who was the last person to be shot on the first floor?
Coach Aaron Feiss.
And Coach Aaron Feiss, what time was Coach Aaron Feiss shot?
2:23:25.
And at 2:23:25, how many times was Aaron Feiss shot?
Twice in the chest.
Ms. Gomes, is this an item that's already in evidence?
It is, I apologize, Judge. We're now showing the screen door remain off, so I'm going to turn my screen as well. What's in evidence as states 5. This is the full 6 hours of surveillance.
Court deputy unit, all the TVs are off.
If you look at that image off to the left where the rifle is being pointed at, which enters into the staircase, and then that door in front of you where you see Nicholas Cruz coming out with the gun leads into the main hallway of the first floor. And it's a mirror image on the east side as well.
So if you're standing on the west side of the building, is there a set of doors that will lead you into the hallway and a set of doors that will lead you into the stairwell?
Yes,
And did you yourself enter this location that we see on this image? You're familiar with this stairwell?
yes.
Where was, in reference to the image we're looking at, Aaron Feiss's body found?
The doors where the rifle is being pointed and you see that bright light,
All right, I'm back.
he was found right on the concrete patio area where those doors would have opened up into, as if he was coming into those doors when he was shot.
Were crime scene investigators or yourself able to discover whether at the time that he was shot, the doors were open or closed?
Well, the doors were open because he got shot from, Nicholas Cruz was inside the building. He was just making, it appeared consistent with him just making entry into the building when he was killed.
And at 2:23:26, was this the last killing that takes place on the first floor?
Yes,
So all of the other deaths that take place happen after 2/23/26.
That is correct.
And how many shell casings, if you know, were discovered, and I apologize if you already said this, on this second floor?
I believe on the second floor there was 6.
Were any students shot on the second floor?
No.
Turning your attention to the third floor.
Yes.
Judge, can we turn the screens off for a moment while he sets up for the next video? You ready? Okay. Now, it may seem like a silly question, but did the shooter go from the first floor to the second floor to the third floor?
Yes,
in
he
order?
did. Yes, he did.
And when the shooter enters the third floor at 2:24:30,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes.
At 2:24:30, when the shooter is on the third floor, explain for us the names of the victims that were shot and were deceased on the third floor.
From the east side of the third floor going to the west, teacher Scott Beagle was killed. Kara Longren, Meadow Pollock, Joaquim Oliver.
Okay, guys,
Jamie
just in
Guttenberg.
case you were unclear before, the people are
In addition
dead,
to those that
and
were
they
killed,
continue
were
to
there
remain
other
dead,
victims that were
unfortunately.
wounded?
Yes, it was.
We
And
checked,
what are their names?
they are still dead.
We had a teacher by the name of Stacy Lapel was on the third floor. Kyle Lyman, Marion Kabachenko, and Anthony Borges.
While the shooter is working his way, killing people on the third floor,
Yes.
approximately how many rounds were recovered from the third floor?
I believe there was over 61 rounds on the third floor.
And those 61 rounds, they were all fired while he spent his 3 minutes or so, or however long, on the third floor,
Yes,
before exiting the building.
yes.
Do you recall what time the shooter ended up blending in with the rest of the students?
I'm gonna refresh my memory and see if I. I may not have it here without my full report unless you have something you can show me.
Does 2:29 sound correct? We can pull up the video if you need.
No, that sounds correct.
Okay. So,
I don't think we have directed judgment territory. There's enough
Two,
we'll just pull up the
dots
video now.
scattered around that a jury could draw inferences. I just think it's a lot of inferences to draw personally. So, on the facts, I don't think we can get directed verdict. I just think the state overpromised in their opening.
Detective Peterson, ask you to take a moment.
actually, it's 227:55.
Is when the shooter leaves the building or places his gun down.
Oh, yeah, he placed his gun on the staircase. And
Okay,
then,
and after placing his gun on the staircase, he then goes down the 3 flights of stairs,
yeah,
correct?
I found it in my notes, so,
Okay.
yes.
All right, and so do you, if you don't know, that's fine, the time that he actually blends in with the students?
He runs for a period of time before he catches up to the hundreds who are fleeing westbound.
Okay.
So, I mean, he takes a few seconds to get there.
Okay, so turning your attention to the screen, do you see the 3 images on your screen?
Yes.
Describe for the members of the jury where these cameras are located, starting with the camera on the left. Are you familiar with this stairwell?
Yes,
Did you personally walk this stairwell?
many times.
Where is this stairwell in reference to the 1200 building or inside the 1200 building?
The picture on the left is coming down from the second floor of the east stairwell down to the first floor. That door that's open on the bottom is where Nicholas Cruz first entered into the hallway after loading his gun.
And the image in the middle, what are we looking at?
That's, again, a camera from the actual the hallway itself shooting westbound down the hallway.
So this camera is located on the east side of the hallway?
Yeah, it's facing from
west.
the east door. It's a camera that shoots westbound towards the west door of the first floor.
And the image
And someone who's
on
been
the
charged
right,
with
are
first
you
degree
familiar
premeditated
with
murder
this
be
camera placement?
Yes.
released on recognizance?
Where is this camera?
In the absence of any
That's
specific
the,
law that requires something to the
location
contrary, I
by the
suppose.
700 building, which is the building just west of the 1200 building.
Is this
I mean, it would be a
camera
little
angled
unusual, but I
looking
guess hypothetically, yes, it could
west-east?
happen. I can't imagine a scenario that actually occurring, but I'm not sure there's anything that legally
I believe
precludes
it's the
it.
opposite. I think it's east to west, but
There might be some specific
I'd have to
statute
actually watch
somewhere,
it.
but
Okay, well, we're gonna hit play.
Yeah, it looks to me, it looks like it's east to west, but I may be wrong. Yeah, it's definitely, that right screen is east.
Okay.
will the court
Left is
documents show
east.
for your buddy who murdered his
Okay,
wife
the
2
right
weeks
of the
ago?
screen is east.
Yes.
Okay. A strange result, to be sure.
Detective, could you read for us on the top of the screen what time it is?
2:24:03 on all three cameras.
Now, the image on the left of the screen, the east stairwell, is that stairwell, let me show you a map.
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about, excuse me, when you're thinking about holding someone pre-trial, or you're thinking about bond conditions, at least hypothetically, what you're supposed to be considering are two factors. You're supposed to be considering what is necessary to get this defendant to actually show up to court,
Point to where that is on this map.
because we want him to show up to court, and is he a danger to the community? Those are the two factors that basically you're considering.
East is that way. This is where we were at with all the self-evacuating students, and this is west going towards where.
In the case of first-degree murder, usually his harm to the community factor is pretty huge,
How far, what is
you
the
know?
distance
Because if
between
he's a murderer, it's like, you know,
side of this 1200 building
laying him out, you know, especially with
and
no
building
conditions,
seven,
seems
the 700
questionable.
building?
It was 75 feet.
But those are the factors you're supposed to consider. Shot his wife in the face 15 times. I'm not even sure how you do that in a practical matter, unless you do it once she's already on the ground. I have a hard time believing they released him on his own recognizance. Perhaps you're reading the court record wrong.
As part of your investigation into Nicholas Cruz.
He's in bed? There you
were
go.
you tasked with speaking with witnesses?
Yes.
Explain the process that you took with the witnesses in this case.
Well, one of the things we did, obviously, is we started interviewing people who knew him, who had encounters with him in the past, people that were up at the school who potentially had dealt with him on whatever the circumstance was, any witnesses who came forward to the actual shooting incident themselves, we interviewed. Most of the people we interviewed were background type witnesses.
Did you also interview the fact witnesses that had been on scene at the time of the shooting?
Yes.
As part of your investigation, did you interview the school resource officer, Scott Peterson?
Yes, I did.
And what detective assisted you with that interview?
Homicide Detective Jeff Curtis.
Why did you interview Scott Peterson?
He had had dealings with Peterson in the past up at the school, or with Cruz earlier in his career up at the school, and we interviewed other BSO deputies who had had calls of service involving Nicholas Cruz as well.
Please walk the jury through the process you took when interviewing Scott Peterson.
We were in a conference room, basically took a sworn statement from him with a digital tape recorder, asked him about the day of the incident, and asked him about any past dealings he had ever had with Nicholas Cruz and what those entailed.
When you're in the interview room, was it made clear that there was a recording device?
Yeah, it was right on the table in front. In
And
fact, I swore him in on, or either I did or Jeff Curtis swore him in under oath.
when you say that you swore him in, what does that mean?
Basically, it's the oath to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. It's just a formality of, this is what you need to do, tell the truth, and if not, it's, perjury.
Did Scott Peterson indicate that he understood he was giving a sworn statement?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because again, we had the interview, and the tape recorder's right in front of him, and I asked questions, he answered them.
When you were interviewing him, was it for matters material to your investigation of the shooter?
Yes.
And it was...
Once again, the lesson, the lesson, as always, is don't talk to the police.
Why put a police officer
Ever.
under oath if you're taking a statement from him? Aren't you all...
I'm increasingly of the opinion that you shouldn't even talk to the police, even if your
We do
lawyer is
everything under
there.
oath.
So even though he was a police officer, you still...
I'm increasingly of the opinion that you should just keep your mouth shut under all
That's what I did when I
circumstances.
took the stand here.
Now, did you ask Deputy Peterson if he understood what perjury meant when you swore him in?
I'm going to refresh my memory exactly what the wording was. Yeah, I did, and his response, again, I don't know if that's me or Jeff talking, but his response was, I do.
Okay. How did Scott Peterson become aware of the fact that something was happening on campus?
He had heard, according to his statement, a faculty member named Drew Medina come over the school radio, not the police radio, but the school radio, saying something about hearing some sounds, possibly firecrackers or something to that effect at the 1200 building.
Did you confirm with Scott Peterson that he heard that the sounds were coming from the 1200 building?
Again, I'd have to look at his statement for exact terminology.
And I'll refer you to page 7.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Scott Peterson's own words were that Andrew Medina said that he heard firecrackers in the 1200 building.
Did the defendant tell you how close he got to the 1200 building?
Yes.
And what were his words?
He got very close. I think he said within 10 feet, but again, I'd have to look at the exact.
So we're using that, are we using that he never went into the building? Are we using, is this what we're doing?
Yes.
Are we getting it from
within
his
50 feet.
statements? Is that what we're doing?
Did he tell
Are
you
his
that he
words
heard
the
them?
thing that are going to
Yes.
be, I was cowering behind a car
he
for
tell
40
you that
minutes?
he looked
Is it the
inside the
defendant who
building?
damns himself?
Oh,
Lord.
He did not.
Did he look in any of the windows?
No.
Did he tell you that he...
All right,
ever
folks, I guess we have to have the
interacted with
conversation again
As I recall,
about
he
not
said he
talking
didn't
to
see
the
anybody
police
coming
because
out
it
of the building.
appears that we're going to be using the defendant's own words during his sworn interview against him about the whole cowering behind the car. We don't need a tape because the defendant himself admitted to it during a sworn interview with the police. Don't talk to the police. This is where this is going. Holy shit. Oh, Lord. Great. Fantastic.
Detective, was the statement that you took of the defendant transcribed?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm showing you what has been pre-marked as states 3A. Can you take a look at this, please?
Yep, it's a transcribed copy of the digital sworn tape and I took from Scott Peterson.
Judge, at this time, the state would move into evidence what's been pre-marked as 3A. It states 52.
Yeah, okay, so this is an audio tape.
No objection.
This is an audio tape, and they want to use a transcript rather than the underlying tape, maybe, or they just want the jury to have a copy of the sworn transcript for their own benefit. Either way, I like it that there's a transcript. That's nice. Yeah, this is going to be the linchpin in their case. That's where this is going. This is the last day of the state's case. This is their last witness. This is how they're bringing it all together. The defendant's own words. You know what's going to happen. You know what's on the tape. You know what's on the tape without hearing the tape, right?
Can you explain for the jury, when it says 13:02 hours, is that military time?
Yeah, it's 1:02, 1 p.m.
So what date and time did you take?
Oh, maybe no video, but we don't need
February
it.
16th, 2000.
Because there is nothing better than the defendant's own words. That is as good as it gets in a trial. I swear.
Actually, it should be
If your choice
2018,
is
that's a
video
transcript
of the
tape.
crime occurring versus defendant's confession,
Because
I'd
no,
rather
that
have
was
the confession
2018.
All right.
as a
and
prosecutor.
What is a CCN?
That's,
I'd rather have the confession. The tape is nice.
Kind of like your badge number, but it's
But
not.
the
It's your
confession
ID
is better.
number that everything,
Yeah.
you know,
So we don't
you
need no
work
stinking
related,
tape.
you identify by a
Yeah.
number.
Now, this entire transcript is in evidence now, but I'm going to direct your attention to certain pages. Give me just a moment.
This is gonna be good, guys. Get your popcorn out. This is Schadenfreude time, big time over here, guys. Thank you, Tony. I try to put on a nice appearance for you guys.
Turning your attention to page 10 of the transcript.
Yes.
Would you please, I'll just read for the members of the jury the question and answer on page 10.
Starting at the highlighted section, the question was, okay, now, as you're approaching the building and you're that close and you're doing what you're talking about with both radios, or are you in a position to cover or you're still standing? And Mr. Peterson answer was, no, that's where I then realized I'm out in the open in the middle. So I then go back towards the right at the corner of the 7 and 800 building and I go back. I bring Greenleaf, I bring back over here and then I obviously whip my gun out. I'm taking a position on the east side of the doorway and I can also see down the sidewalk looking out west. I get a good two-dimensional of the whole building at that point.
Continue,
Want me to
please.
continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, then my question is, okay, I say okay. So I'm right there, I'm on the radio, I can hear the units coming, and the next thing, while I'm keeping an eye on the door in the building, no shots, nothing anymore, it's quiet.
The
And
last
then
section.
my question, okay, so you're right here is what you're saying. We had a little map that he was pointing things out. And then his answer, yes, I'm right. I'm looking out so I can see the door and I can see out here. I got a good look, or I got a good.
Yep. Yep.
Top of the page. I'll ask you to read just this.
It's gonna get
question and
worse.
answer indicated there.
Okay, do you see any students or any people around the 1200 building at that point? And his answer was no, nobody.
Okay, turning your attention to page 12 of 36.
Okay.
read, starting with the highlighted portion.
All right, we're discussing Coral Springs Officer Burton in this section, and the question is, all right, what happens from there? Scott Peterson's answer was, and he runs up by the tree, and I'm just telling him, you know, I heard a couple of shots, haven't heard anything since, and he's just taking cover by, you know, behind the tree, and I'm taking cover here, and units are now starting, you know, no more gunshots, and units are starting to come in. And then my question is, okay, as the units start to come in, what do you see and what do you do? And then the answer by Scott Peterson was, well, as the units start coming in, the first units are coming in saying, hey, there's someone shot over by the football field. You know, I know where the football field is. It's quite a distance from this building. So when I start hearing they talk about the victim over by the football field, in my mind, I was kind of, is he maybe running towards that? Maybe he's not even in this building. He might be somewhere way out over there. I mean, in my mind, I obviously didn't know, you know, where the shooter was, and then I started wondering if he had fled westbound at that point, because they were talking about people injured near the football field, which is quite a distance from the building. Want me to continue?
I'll direct you just a moment.
No problem.
Directing you to page 14.
Okay.
Now,
I'm in good spirits today. Thank
why
you
did
for
ask
asking,
me?
Moan.
What's in your thought process? What's the importance of asking
Monet,
if he saw
or however you
any
pronounce her
children
name.
leave the building?
Well, you know, again, we use the word active intelligence to try to figure out what's going on. Active intelligence goes beyond hearing gunshots. It's everything from seeing casings to a blood trail to getting information from people as to what's going on. Those are all the term active intelligence. So, just like I was trying to do, interviewing all those students, I was asking him if he got any active intelligence by talking to anybody.
Okay, and the highlighted
I haven't eaten
question and
breakfast
answer,
yet.
please. Actually, if you could start right above it.
Did you go into 12 at all? No, because no. Question, okay, now did you ever see, you know, while everybody is starting to arrive, did you ever see any of the students leaving building 12 at all? Yes. Question, which were they, all the doors, or no, they were evacuating, they were telling them to, they were taking them out, and the kids were going out towards the parking lot. Okay, that's when the officers arrived, But you didn't see any kids? No, when I was on the scene, there were no individuals running out, none.
Did you confirm, oh, sorry, keep going.
Okay, so the question is, okay, so there was no kids that ran out to say to you guys, hey, there's a guy up there or anything like that, and his answer was no.
Okay, now, did you confirm, when you're taking this statement, have you already reviewed the surveillance cameras?
The only video we had reviewed at that point was the interior of the 1200 building. The exterior we had not viewed yet because it had been taken to another site. So when I was taking this statement, I had not seen any of the exterior videos at all.
So is the point of this statement just to gather whatever information he may have had from the scene that day?
Not only from the scene, but background about his interactions with Nicholas Cruz in the past.
Turn your attention to page, just a moment. 35 or 36. Now, how many gunshots did the defendant tell you that he heard?
2 or 3.
Explain for the members of the jury what the purpose is of asking this final question here towards the end of the interview that we see that's highlighted on page 35.
That's a standard question I ask anybody I'm interviewing. Is there anything else that I failed to ask you that you feel is important or relevant, again, that I haven't asked you?
So that wasn't something unique to this interview?
Every interview I do, I try to incorporate that because, again, I'm asking the questions, but is there something I haven't asked you that's important that I need to know?
Yeah, tagging someone on your phone is really difficult, Amber. It doesn't really let you do that. You have to type it in manually. It's a pain in the ass.
I asked you about it, but I didn't show you. I'm going to refer you to the bottom of page 9. Can you read that question at the bottom of page 9 for us?
The very last one?
Yes.
All right. Once you get closer and you hear those guys, how many rounds do you think you heard? And then that was the response on page 10. It wasn't many, 2, 3.
Detective Curcio, how many rounds in total were fired inside the 1200 building?
I'd have to look to make sure. Let's see. I believe it was
All right, I was hoping for
over
more
130.
from his confession, to be honest. I was hoping for
So
more.
over 130?
So
And how
even
many
his
rounds in
confession is a
total
little bit of a
between
nothing
the
burger
second
so
and
far,
the third
which is a little
floor
disappointing.
From that time after Aaron Feist
I was all
shot
excited.
Howard?
70.
I mean, it's helpful. It's just not, the bomb
asked you
drop
the
I was kind of
names.
hoping for. So,
And you
all
did,
right.
you provided us with names of the wounded as well on the third floor. Okay, just a moment to confer, Your Honor.
The jury certainly could draw reasonable inferences to say that he didn't do anything. I think the state overpromised, at least in my opinion. But to reach the conclusion that the defendant didn't do anything based on the evidence available, they could reach that inference. I thought the state had, a bomb drop, and they haven't quite done that. But not every case has a bomb drop, so. But I felt like they promised me one, so.
I'm going to direct you to page 14 of 36. You have it copied, that's fine. I'm going to ask you to read for us the question that begins with, okay, so there was, towards the bottom of the page.
Okay, so there was no kids that ran out to say to you guys, hey, there's a guy up there or anything of that, and the answer was no.
Next question.
The question, you didn't see any kids until police started being evacuated by the police, and then his response was yes.
Judge, I have nothing else.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's it? I am disappointed.
Good morning, Detective.
Sir?
You and I have met during deposition, correct?
Yes.
In fact, there were 3 separate days that we conducted the deposition back in 2021, correct?
I don't remember the exact date, but there was 2.5 days worth of deposition, yes.
Okay. And you understood at that time that all your answers would be memorialized in a transcript, correct?
Yes.
And you rose your right hand and swore to tell the truth the same way you are now, correct?
Yes.
And we went over the details of your investigation into the Nicholas Cruz case, correct?
I'm sure we went into some part of it, yes. I don't know if we went into the full details of it.
And we also talked about your involvement in this particular case, correct?
Yes.
You remember the prosecutor asking you about the kids and adults who were shot on the first floor of the 1200 building, correct?
Yes.
Without question, my client wasn't even at the scene when those shootings took place. Isn't that correct?
No, he was on the scene when Aaron Feist got shot.
Got it. Except for Aaron Feist in the stairwell on the first floor. Other than that, my client was not even there when those kids were killed.
Not based on the video timeline. He was
Okay.
approaching the building.
So there's nothing he could have physically done
Is the video?
to prevent their tragic demise. Isn't that correct, sir?
I disagree on Chris Hickson.
Okay. So we'll talk about the first shots that were fired in the stairwell. Remember when the prosecutor asked you about that? That was at 2:23:55. Correct? I'm sorry, 2:23:25. Isn't that correct?
Okay, the first shots when Luke Hoyer and you talking about those?
I'm referring to when Aaron Feist was shot at 2:23:25. Correct?
Okay, yes.
And 1 second after that, you are aware that that's when my client announces shots fired, possible firecrackers, possible shots fired. Remember that?
I don't remember the exact terminology. That sounds accurate based on the timeline, yes.
And that was 1 second after Aaron Feist was shot at 2:23:25. Isn't that correct, sir?
Yes.
And when Aaron Feist was shot, the door was open. The door to the stairwell was open. Isn't that correct?
That's what it appeared to be.
And Aaron Feist was on the opposite side of the door, correct?
He was, in my opinion, making entry when he was shot. He fell backwards outside the door.
Let me show you what is in evidence as defense exhibit number 1. And if you could show us where Aaron Feist's body was found. You just point to it, please.
In this area here, which is where you...
Okay, you pointed up at the column. It was actually down on the concrete ground, correct?
Yeah, again, the body was moved, but it was down towards this area here.
Okay. Are you showing us that it was outside of this door?
Yeah, he fell outside the door.
Okay.
The door was open and he fell backwards.
Now that shot was different than the other shots fired in that there was no door that was open when the other shots were fired, correct?
That's correct.
And then after Aaron Feist was shot, there are no additional shots for another 26 seconds. Isn't that correct?
I have to look at the timeline. That sounds accurate.
Because the next round of shots into 12:31 was at 2:23:51. Isn't that correct?
Counsel's testifying.
No, that's what
You can answer.
Again, I'd have to look at the timeline for the exact times. He goes up to the second floor and he shoots the 6 rounds into the building. I don't remember the exact seconds, but it's all on a timeline.
Okay. And that would have been north. The shooter would be pointing his weapon north into room 1231. Isn't that correct?
Well, again, the building's kind of oriented, so he was been firing westbound, kind of into those second floor building, classrooms where no one was hit, because the rounds impacted the window on the west side of the 1200 building. We're talking about the second floor, right?
We're talking about the second floor. The round of gunfire into 1234, for example, would have been in the direction of my client, correct?
Yes,
And would
but
have,
that's west, kind of westbound.
well,
It's, I'll go northwest with you, but it's west, Cruz would have been firing westbound.
you're certain of that?
The 700 building is west of the 1200 building.
If the football field is west,
That's northwest, yes.
okay, and my client would have been positioned south of
West.
the 1200 building, correct?
No, he's directly across from the 1200 building and the 700 building.
Doesn't that put him south, sir?
It's kind of southwest. The building is not exactly north-south. It's kind of on an angle.
My client's on the east side of the 1200 building.
Fun with compass
Further
directions
south,
is what we're
correct.
doing right now.
He's on the west side of the 1200 building. The 1200 building is the furthest east building. So he's west of the 1200 building.
Is your testimony that my client was on the west side of the 1200 building or the east side?
He was at the 700 building, which is on the west side of the 1200 building. It's the building west of the 1200 building. We're going to put the map up. I'll show you. The 1200 building is the furthest east building of the campus.
Okay, if this is the 700 building,
Yeah, this is going west. So your client was west of the 1200 building.
you're saying that this is west? Isn't the football field west?
Okay, so 1200 building. This is where he was standing. So this is west. This whole area is west. This is east.
The football field is west of the
That's
1200 building.
northwest. This is southwest.
And my client was over here, correct?
Yes.
So this would have put him south of the 1200 building, correct?
And west of the 1200 building.
We're east.
I mean, we can argue with it. I mean, it's not east, because east is this way.
If he's positioned over here, you're saying that this is west of the 1200 building?
Objection asked to me.
I'm saying it's
No, hold on,
southwest.
the objection is overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can
That's
answer.
your testimony.
Okay.
Well,
Regardless, though, my client could not have seen what was occurring on the west side of the 1200 building, isn't that correct?
that was the point of that. Yes, you're correct.
And so Aaron Feist being shot, my client couldn't physically have seen that, correct?
No.
And this building, the 1200 building, is 73 yards long, isn't that correct?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it northwest.
So
I'd
my
call it
client
north
would have
by
been at
northwest.
least
Are you sure it's
73
north by
yards away from
northwest and
where Aaron
not
Feist was shot, is that correct?
north by
And
west?
Aaron Feist was shot on the west side with the door, the west side door open, correct?
Yes.
Well, I think it was 352
And
degrees
the
of
total
the
amount of time the
compass.
shooter was in that building was 6 minutes and 36 seconds, isn't that correct?
That sounds
Are you sure it's 352
But my client
degrees and not
wasn't there until the last
351
4
and
minutes
10
and 15
seconds?
seconds, isn't that correct?
Yes.
So the total time that my client has to react, identify where the shooter or shooters are located, get in there and kill the killer would have been merely 4 minutes and 15 seconds, isn't that correct?
Well, again, you're using the term "kill the killer." I wouldn't use that term. Your time frame is correct,
Okay,
but the action, I kind of disagree with what you're saying. The action a little bit.
okay. The total time that my client had to confront whoever was creating this
Actually, this
massacre
school is
would have been
located
4
directly
minutes
at
and
the North
15
Pole.
seconds, correct?
So literally every direction
And by
is
the way,
south.
let me show you what's been marked as. the
Every
first
direction is
exhibit.
south.
Looks like, okay. Let me show you and ask you if you recognize who's contained in this photograph.
What is the exhibit marked as?
It looks like an L, Judge, or a C, I'm not sure. I'm showing what's been marked as Defense Exhibit L. Do you recognize who's contained in that photo?
Yep.
Okay, is that fair? Who is that?
Nicholas Jacob Cruz.
Okay. Does this fairly accurately identify Nicholas Jacob Cruz?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, we've moved this into evidence?
Any objection?
No, Judge.
Without objection, defense L for identification will now be in evidence. That is defense exhibit 3.
Judge, if I can have this one, please.
As soon as Ms. Wilcox marks the exhibit.
I stroke it to the east. I stroke it to the west. I stroke it to the girl that I love best. Stroke it. Da, da, da.
Would you like to-
Da.
Yeah, you want another piece, Ross?
Yeah, please. Go to Joe Simpson.
What is
That's
East
Nicholas
anyway?
Cruz, isn't
East
it?
is just a social
Is that the
construct,
person responsible for killing all those people?
and
Yes, he is.
East is just a
And you were the lead
Western
investigator in this case,
societal
correct?
construct
Yes, I
that
was.
expresses
He had nobody else with
reinforcement
him,
of the
correct?
cisnormative,
No, he
hetero,
But at the
Eastern
time, you didn't
Orthodox
know, correct? You
patriarchy.
arrived on scene.
No,
I identify as West.
In fact, none of the officers that worked for BSO would have known that there was just one shooter on campus, correct?
that's correct.
If you go east far enough, I mean, you are going west, right? I mean, one way to go
Your
west is by going
It's
east.
not as the lead investigator.
You'll get
in
there
the case
eventually.
against Scott Peterson, correct?
No, it is not.
You are the lead investigator
Yeah.
in the state of Florida versus Nicholas Cruz, correct?
I was, yes.
That case is
So aren't
over,
west and
correct?
east really just
Yes.
the same thing?
And the way that it worked in that case is that you conducted a very professional and thorough investigation, did you not?
I don't know if that's a statement or a question. I would like to believe I did, but
Yeah, no, it is. It's a statement. Do you agree with that?
I did an investigation that culminated in him pleading guilty to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder.
And the investigation was extensive over many, many years even, correct?
That is correct.
And during that time, you interviewed numerous witnesses, correct?
Yes,
You take sworn statements from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of witnesses, correct?
not so much hundreds on this case, but in my career, yes, hundreds of witnesses.
Okay. And you have pages of reports, correct?
On this case, yes,
And when we say on this case, we're referring to Nicholas Cruz, correct?
yes,
Okay, that's what we're talking about right now, okay? Just want to know what your role was in Nicholas Cruz and what a lead investigator does in a case, right?
yes,
And you don't determine what charges get filed, correct?
no, well, in this case, we charged him with a probable cause affidavit. This,
You keep saying in this case, we're referring to Nicholas Cruz,
Okay.
correct? So I'm just asking you, ultimately, a prosecutor in the Nicholas Cruz case makes the determination what charges should be filed, correct?
Objection relevance.
That's sustained.
The prosecutor doesn't investigate the case, that's your job, correct?
Objection relevance.
No, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can answer that question.
yes, but in that case, it was presented to a grand jury, and then the state attorney, obviously, from there took over.
In cases where there's no grand jury, you do an investigation,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
You present your reports to the prosecutor, correct?
yes,
And it's important that those reports are very accurate and detailed, correct?
yes,
For two primary purposes. Number one, you have to rely
I don't know that
on
I want to be a
accuracy of those
trial
reports
lawyer, or
years
apologize,
later
a
when
trial
you testify,
judge,
correct?
or really a
Yes.
trial lawyer, to
And
be
you often
honest.
refresh your recollection
This
utilizing
seems like some
those reports,
bullshit.
correct?
yes.
I'm an appellate
But
guy.
also because you're submitting reports to a prosecutor for them to determine what the facts are, correct?
Well, the report is based on statements, so they have both the statements and the report to rely on.
And then based upon what's submitted to the prosecutor decides what might the appropriate charges be, correct?
Yes.
Objection relevance.
Yeah, that's sustained.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Your Honor.
And you were not the lead investigator in this case, that was Keith Riddick, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now regarding the shooting, you
East,
weren't there when any of
west,
the gunshots rang out, correct?
near,
That is correct.
far, wherever you are,
You have no firsthand knowledge
My heart
of how
will go
challenging it was to determine precisely where the shooters were located based upon sound, correct?
I would say.
Thank you, Simon. I was
in
very
this
pleased
case,
my
that's
last
correct.
video did as well as it did.
You must have spoken.
Did very well for my
let me
channel
ask you,
recently.
Did you interview any witnesses
So that was nice.
who heard shots being fired to find out where they thought those shots were coming from?
In reference to my investigation, I interviewed some of them. A lot of them were interviewed by Keith Riddick, but yes, I interviewed some of them.
Okay. And did you ever supply any of those names to Keith Riddick?
Yes.
And in those statements, you would have identified where they were positioned, correct?
Yes.
And where they thought the shots might have been coming from, correct?
Yes.
And you thought that was being of service to Keith Riddick, so he can include that as part of the case against Scott Peterson, correct?
Again, when I would come upon somebody, on my case that I was interviewing, if it crossed over into what Keith Riddick was investigating, I would say, in particular, this is a guy, have you interviewed him yet? If not, you need to.
Did you, through your investigation, ever compile a list of all of the hundreds of students who were coming out of the building to determine where they were when the shots rang out and where they thought the shots were coming from?
What we did, and this is going to be somewhat of a long answer, since we evacuated the entire school, we had to get in contact with everybody who was on campus that day to find out if they heard shots or what they saw. And it wasn't just me doing it, it was hundreds of detectives from every agency. If they heard or saw something of relevance, it was then funneled back to us. If they didn't, if they were like in the, whatever, 800 building and they didn't see or hear anything, then they were not provided, I didn't get their names, they were just documented by the...
Is it your testimony that you spoke or had someone speak to every one of the, let's say, 1,000 of kids that were both in the 700 building and the neighboring buildings that came out during the fire alarm?
We split up the school roster of not only staff members but students, and when I say we, I'm talking about the sheriff's office, and detectives contacted, they had like 25 on a sheet, and they were supposed to contact every one of them to find out if they had any relevant information towards the investigation.
Where are those sheets?
They're in the case file. But anybody who had significant information then was funneled back to a detective to be formally interviewed. If they just hid in the auditorium and they didn't see or hear anything, then they were not funneled back to us.
I'm referring to kids who came out of these buildings and heard shots fired. Where are those? Those notes are in the case file?
No, again, what I'm telling you is everybody who was on campus was recontacted because we had sent everybody potentially running off campus. The investigation that you're talking about is Keith Riddick's files.
Right, okay.
I mean, if I had a crossover witness...
Fair enough, I understand that you're not the lead on this case. So it's Keith Riddick who would have been responsible for what you're talking about, correct?
If I can I give you a very short example of
I just want to know if the answer is yes or no. Would have been Keith Riddick responsible for that, not you, correct?
Keith Riddick was responsible for the investigation about the police response, not just Scott Peterson, but any police response. Mine was Nicholas Cruz.
I understand, but Keith Riddick is the sole lead investigator in the case against Scott Peterson. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you arrived on scene, did you know that Coral Springs had a separate 911 call center?
No, I did not.
You learned that after the fact, right?
Yes.
Did you think when you arrived that when people were calling in to 911 saying there's a shooter in the 1200 building and kids are being killed, that somehow that information was being disseminated to BSO?
Again, when I'm on scene, I didn't know that even existed. Obviously, afterwards, I learned about that issue.
Also, in terms of patching, did you think that Coral Springs Radio would have been patched with BSO so that they could be working in concert together?
That's a normal protocol when you have agencies that are not a part of the BSO radio system.
It's normal protocol, but it was protocol that you learned was not followed in this case, correct?
I think it was attempted, but because of the radio problems that day, on both ends, they weren't able to accomplish it. I think they tried to patch, but the BSO radio system was failing based on how many radios were trying to key up at the same time, where you would I don't even know what the term is anymore, it would go into fail soft mode, where where you couldn't transmit and you couldn't hear.
How fair is that to officers who are on the scene?
I was one of the officers on the scene. I mean, I don't know how fair it is. That's just what happened. It's just the way, unfortunately, the way it happened that day.
When you say unfortunate, why is it unfortunate?
Because again, you're trying to gather real-time intelligence, and as police officers in the modern era, we rely on our radios.
Right.
And to get communications from people who have the best real-time intelligence. And in this case, because the radios failed, that was a difficult task.
Impossible for some who would try to get on their radios and it would throttle, correct?
Yes.
Explain for the jurors what would happen if someone had some important real-time intelligence to convey to my client or other officers on the scene. Tell us what would happen.
Again, the technology is well beyond my expertise, but if you try to transmit, it would make this alarming boinking sound, which meant it wasn't coming over because there were just too many people trying to either transmit or they were flooding. There's only so many slots that you can get on the radio system, and once that overfills, it goes into fail-safe or fail-soft mode.
And so first responders, you would agree, were grossly hindered by the fact that the radios were not working properly, correct?
I would say that's accurate.
The fact that the radios with Coral Springs were not patched, correct?
Yes.
And that nobody from Coral Springs called BSO dispatch to say, hey, here's some information you might want to convey to your officers, correct?
I know they tried to transfer some 911 calls, and in some cases that failed as well. Because Coral Springs was getting the 911 calls from, in some cases, inside the building, and when they would try to transfer them to BSO, the transfers weren't going through.
And so all that information was never conveyed to BSO officers like my client, isn't that correct?
No, it wasn't it wasn't given over the radio at all that I can recall.
And there's no question, through your investigation, you learned that there were numerous children calling in from the 1200 building, indicating exactly where the shooter was located, correct?
Children and teachers.
And that went to Coral Springs, not BSO, isn't that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
You agree that that is unacceptable, correct?
Objection, Judge.
Yeah, but that's sustained. His opinion, he's a fact witness, not an expert. His opinion is not relevant. Go ahead, sir.
That is not how you guys were trained, correct?
I would say it's not optimum because it's not the way we're trained. It's just the fact that if you're responding to an incident, again, you're trying to get real-time intelligence by whatever means you can, and a 911 call from inside the building is real-time intelligence.
When you arrived on scene, I think you testified earlier that a lieutenant colonel told you that someone was shot, correct?
No, that was while I was at the public safety building.
Okay. That information never came out over your BSO radio, correct?
I think that may have been one of the guys on Holmberg actually saying he had a guy shot at the football field, which was Mr. Lamont.
That is correct. Football field. Did you hear that announcement saying that somebody was on the football field being shot?
Well, when a lieutenant colonel came running in, he didn't say football field. He just said there was a student shot and there was a shooting up at the school.
My question is, did you hear Deputy Kratz announce in real time that the shots were coming from the football field?
I didn't the day of the incident. I heard it afterwards while I was doing my investigation.
And just so we're clear, that when Deputy Kratz makes that announcement during the shooting, the shooter was in the middle of the 3rd floor, correct? Did you match that up?
I don't know if he was in the middle. I think he was in the teacher's planning room, I believe.
He had not gotten to the teaching planning room, isn't that correct?
I'd have to look at the timeline. I just know he was on the 3rd floor.
That's correct. Now, you told the prosecutor that the purpose of your interview with my client was to find out more about Nicholas Cruz. That's what you said, correct?
Well, that was part of it. I mean,
Right. So tell the jurors the other part of it, sir.
the part of it, which is the beginning stages, is what he saw, your client, and what he heard that day.
Just
where he was at.
Just so we're clear, this is not a formal debriefing as required by the active shooter policy, correct? That wasn't your purpose.
No,
correct?
I'm a homicide detective. I don't do formal debriefings.
Got it. You're aware that the active shooter policy requires timely debriefings of officers. You're aware of that, correct?
I'd have to read it again, but that sounds accurate.
Just so we're clear, a debriefing is when you get into detail with someone to learn exactly what they know, what they feel, what they think, correct?
Debriefing, in my opinion, is so you can review what happened to make things better if there was an issue.
That was not your purpose, correct?
No, I was a homicide investigator in charge of the investigation of the killings.
And isn't it a fact that this interview actually happened because, first of all, Brian Tutler and Zach Scott were liaisons to the families, correct?
That's correct.
And family members started asking where Peterson was during the shooting, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, pause on
And
the objection,
hearsay.
because we're over for a restroom break anyway. So ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna pause on the cross-examination. I'm gonna give you a real quick restroom break. Same admonition as always. Please don't discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony.
Okay, great. Sorry, just had to finish the thought that I was typing. And you know how it is when you're trying to do something, you want to finish what you're doing. So apologize for the slight break as I was typing.
Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. Ms. Combs, what's your legal objection?
Judge, well, it's hearsay, first of all, as to what these other men, I think their names were Zach, I don't know who their names were, but also it's irrelevant as to the motivations behind.
So the question to the witness was, isn't it true that parents made certain statements out of court that are not to this witness? So why is that not hearsay?
First of all, it's impeachment. His answer was the only reason why I conducted this interview was to, quote, find out about Nicholas Cruz. To impeach him, first and foremost, his testimony and deposition is that they were there to find out what occurred because the family members started asking where Peterson was during the shooting, and that then his sergeant said, we then need to interview Peterson, and that's when they went to the public safety building for the sworn statement.
Okay, so then what, again, we've had this discussion before, what is the relevance for this jury as to why?
At a minimum, it's impeachment, Judge. He said that the purpose was for one thing, but there actually is sworn testimony, and he began to concede that there was another purpose as to why it was.
So are you saying it's not hearsay because you're using it for impeachment purposes?
I'm saying it goes to, it's not hearsay because it goes to state of mind. Why did he conduct this?
Isn't it not being offered for the truth? You're asserting that that actually happened, right? So
No.
it's an out-of-court statement being asserted for the truth of the matter.
It goes to his state of mind.
Whose state of mind?
This witness's
Why
state
is
of
his
mind
state of mind
as to
relevant
why.
as to what this jury has to decide? Again, I'm gonna let you do a proffer outside of the presence of the jury when we're done with all this, but this is inures to the discussion that we've had several times before. This jury isn't gonna be asked to decide why charges were filed or what the reason charges were filed. The only decision they have to make is, has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crimes charged. The reason that the charges were filed is not in the purview of the jury, and I'm going to sustain the state's objection. I'm not going to let you.
Your Honor, it's impeachment. The officer testified. The sole reason was to find out about Nicholas Cruz. I can't bring up.
That's not what he said.
No,
He
it's
said-
not.
Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir.
Sorry. You want me to leave, Your Honor?
If you would like to step down and use the
Yeah, I
restroom,
would,
you just
please.
can't talk to anyone about your testimony.
He left off the other. He left off the other portion, Judge, that he was asked by family members.
I disagree with you, sir. He said, you asked him that last question, and he said, it was two reasons. Number one, I was the homicide detective for Nicholas Cruz. Number two, I wanted to find out what Mr. Peterson.
Right, he
said.
left out the other reason.
That doesn't matter, Mr. Adcox.
Okay.
I know you don't agree with my
Right.
ruling, sir, but it doesn't matter.
Then note my objection for the record, okay? And if you're sustaining the objection, again, I'm
No, I'm gonna, when we're done with redirect examination, if there is any, with recross if there is any, I'll send the jury out again, and you may make your record and ask the detective whatever you would like to ask to, as a proffer.
Yeah, and
Similarly,
Judge,
as I've let you do with the
the
others.
state was the one who asked him what his reasons were for doing, and he left out the primary reason why he did this, which is what he tells us in deposition. In deposition, he said the primary reason was because the families wanted to know where Peterson was at. And I'm not allowed to bring that out in front of the jury? Okay, so no, my objection.
State, anything else you need me to address?
No, Judge.
All right, real quick 5-minute restroom break. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
All right, guys. Yeah, so that's where we're sitting on all that. So fun and exciting. Yeah, I'm disappointed we didn't get more out of the detective. I thought that he was going to be the big, take-home guy, and I thought he was going to really, crucify the defendant with his own words, and it just didn't really happen. So, so. Yeah, and I have no particular opinion on this objection. It's a little in the weeds for my taste, so I'll let you guys judge amongst yourselves on that one. Trial work. Trials are annoying, right? Trials are about facts, right? Trials are about facts. Appeals are about law. I like law. I'm not so much into the facts, Facts are annoying. Facts are unclear things, right? What are the facts? Are an unclear thing. Just tell me the facts. I'll tell you the law, That's what I think. So trials are sometimes a little bit, like who did what to whom. It's like, okay, just tell me the answer so I can move on to the next thing. But that's me. I watch some of these trial judges and I'm like, I don't know if I want that job. Just seems like me having to put up with a bunch of attorneys bullshit all the time. It seems like refereeing whiny babies sometimes. Like I'm the teacher monitor in a school ground fight or something. It's like, To the best of my knowledge, sheriff is an elected position everywhere. I don't know there's anywhere a sheriff is non-elected, but feel free to prove me wrong. Yeah. Oh, no, I definitely find the defense attorney obnoxious at parts. I don't disagree with you, Nicole. I definitely find him obnoxious at parts. He's good on having tools in his toolbox. So, and he's good at being able to extract what he needs on cross. But I agree with you that he definitely can come off as obnoxious. And I definitely agree with you that he is pushing the judge. And I think he's doing it deliberately because he thinks it's to his advantage. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a personality trait, or maybe he's doing it deliberately because he's trying to do things to his advantage. But either way, it feels like not great at times. So like overall, I give him like an 8 out of 10. I think is a fair assessment. I think he's really good at getting what he needs out of the witnesses. Sometimes he gets a little frustrated because he doesn't get exactly the answer he wants, and he won't let a minor point go. Like that whole like West thing. Like, did we really need to have a whole colloquy about exactly the cardinal directions on the map? Was that really that important that we needed to spend that much time there? It's like, because you're fighting over such a small point, and it's like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So I agree with you that he's obnoxious at times. I find his tone a little bit overly aggressive. He is pushing the judge, and he is also testifying. So I give him like an 8 out of 10. And but he knows the tools he needs, and he's also very good, at least in he's very good in figuring out how to get what he needs to help his defense from witnesses who are not necessarily there to help him. So he knows like the state's overall basic theory of the case, and he knows these witnesses, and he figured out where he can extract points from them, and that's not easy. That's not easy. So his actual execution sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired, but him figuring out how to get what he needs and what he can get from these witnesses and actually getting it is pretty great. He's a little rough around the edges sometimes. So that's my overall assessment of the thing. So, and he does sometimes not let things go when he should let things go. Discretion is sometimes the better part of valor. Sometimes letting things go is the right thing to do, especially when you're fighting over such a small thing. It's like, is it really worth fighting over whether exactly it's west or east or all the rest of things? Like, reframe the question, figure out a different way to ask it. It's like, okay. So that's what's all going on. But I was, I was disappointed in this witness and sort of the this sworn statement under oath. I thought we'd get more. I thought, we'd really get, a lot more from this guy about, oh yeah, I was cowering behind a car for 40 minutes and all the rest of it. Because I stand by it. Like, confessions are like the best thing ever. And they're a nightmare for defense lawyers, They're an absolute nightmare. Because every person who sits on a jury is absolutely convinced. They're absolutely convinced. I would never confess unless I did it. I would never confess. It must be true because they said it. Confessions are the prosecutor's greatest tool in the world. I mean, you can have eyewitness testimony to the contrary. You can have video evidence to the contrary. You can have oral statements to the contrary. You could probably have freaking DNA to the contrary. If you have a confession, as a prosecutor, you're a very happy person, right? As a defense lawyer, you'd be like, jury, look at the DNA. It doesn't match my client. Look at the video. It doesn't show him on tape. Look at the eyewitnesses. They never saw him there. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And the prosecution's but the confession though. But the confession though goes a long fucking way. This is one of the reasons why you don't want to talk to the police, because there's just nothing better in this world than damnation that comes from your own mouth. Because every juror's like, I'd never confess. Well, he must be did. I know the video evidence and DNA and the eyewitnesses don't match. And I know he was, seen by 300 people at this ballpark, but, he must have done it because he confessed. Nate's calling me again. Hold on. What? Nate says hi. So yeah, as confessions go, though, this particular confession was weak. As this particular confession goes, it's weak. So yeah, the words from your own mouth will damn you, but this guy didn't give apparently that many words from his own mouth. So yeah. Good times. Don't talk to the police. I'm increasingly of the opinion that you shouldn't talk to the police under any circumstances. I don't even think you should talk to the police with your lawyer present at this point. I'm increasingly of the opinion I want to remain silent and I have nothing to say to you and go away is the correct answer. Because even with your lawyer present, right? Because, like, for example, in the Trump case, right, his body man, his valet, his guy that helps him do his stuff from day to day, he had a lawyer present and his words are being used against him. I'm increasingly of the opinion you shouldn't talk to the police ever, period. And exceptions are becoming increasingly rare in my mind. I think the only situation in which you would consider talking to the police at this point is I think there's still a case to be made in a self-defense scenario if you're concerned about loss of evidence because the police might not know or might be a little bit sloppy. So the only sort of counter consideration I can really see at this mind is like a self-defense situation, which arguably is one of the times you should keep your mouth shut the most. I just think there's countervailing considerations that also need to be brought into the fold. Like, suppose, for example, a guy attacks you with a knife and you shoot the guy and the knife is now in a bush. All right. It would be nice if the police find that knife, but maybe they don't find the knife because the police are a little bit sloppy. So I think there's a case maybe to be made. It's like, yes, he dropped the knife. If you know this, incidentally, of course, because obviously it's like, or he had a knife and he dropped it and it's in that bush over there, go look for it. That would be something. Or if there are eyewitnesses who are present, because those eyewitnesses may not be there for very long because they may not be findable. So if there are eyewitnesses who are present, you can be like, oh yeah, these people saw it. Or, if there's brass casings from the guy because he shot at you, the brass casings get picked up by a bystander, or it gets caught up in a truck tire or something and taken down the road or whatever. So I think that maybe there's a case to be made for a self-defense scenario where the scene is such that evidence may not be there, or the police may not be able to find it because they're incompetent idiots. So maybe there's a case to be made there. Arguably not even then, though, because again, your words will be used against you. So I don't know. That's the only sort of situation where maybe you should talk to the police. But even then, I'm not so sure. Because there's the problem is, right? The problem is there's just no way on this earth that you, or even me for this matter, could possibly confine themselves to just this information. There's no way that you or me are going to be able to say only the things that are necessary and not say the things that will harm you, right? So it's like, it's a very interesting calculation, which of course you have to make in the moment. So I don't know. Also, incidentally, while I'm thinking about it, just FYI, what was I about to say? I lost my train of thought. Aren't they changing what constitutes attorney-client privilege? No, they're not changing it. It's just, it's weird in the situation. They're not exactly changing it. The rules are the same. The applicability of the facts to the rules in the Trump case are questionable, but the rule is fundamentally the same. But whatever, yeah, it's so. What else was I going to think about? Yeah, I don't remember. Don't talk to the police though. Yeah, and if you're going to invoke your right to remain silent, remember to keep it simple, right? Please, just say the words, I want to remain silent. I want an attorney. It really is that simple. Please don't overcomplicate it too much. Because if you overcomplicate it, there's a very good chance that what you're going to say is going to be ambiguous. And the court's going to be like, well, you didn't invoke your right to remain silent because it was ambiguous. So just keep it simple. I want to remain silent. I want a lawyer.
Don't even have a clock.
I invoke my right to remain silent. I wish to remain silent. Don't overcomplicate it. Just say it. Say it clearly and unambiguously, please. This is one of those situations where keep it simple, stupid is very good advice. Yeah, and don't give interviews to the press. Trump, every time he opens his mouth, sinks his case ever further.
Okay, I'm gonna go back on the record. This is State versus Scott.
Trump is in. I continue to maintain Trump is in some serious legal trouble. And the fact he continues to open his face hole doesn't help.
For the state, I continue to have Mr. Igarsh present with Mr. Peterson, who likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. The witness remains on the witness stand. State, anything you need me to address before we bring the jury back in?
No, Judge.
Defense, anything you need me to address before we bring the jury back in?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, please bring the jury back.
You know for an absolute certainty that every press interview Trump gives will absolutely be used against him at trial. You do understand that, right? Trump doesn't seem to understand that. Every time Trump opens his mouth, it reduces options. Remain silent is improperly used against you by some prosecutors. That's true. There was recently a case in a state Supreme Court where that came up because the guy was silent and the prosecutor used it against him and got a conviction. And the state Supreme Court reversed because no. So yes, sometimes prosecutors do that. They shouldn't. They should know better. And apparently they didn't. And apparently the trial judge was like, oh, this is fine by me. And it took the goddamn state Supreme Court to come in and be like, no, right to remain silent is still a thing. It's been a thing for, 60 years, but yeah. Okay.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, come on. Ladies and gentlemen, once you're back at those seats, you may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using the notepads, I'll give you a moment to get those notepads back out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when we took our quick restroom break, we were in the middle of the cross-examination of the witness. The witness remains on the witness stand under oath. Mr. Eigler, if you're all ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. When you conducted the interview of my client, there was no pending criminal investigation, correct?
Against your client?
Yeah.
No,
There wasn't even an internal affairs investigation, correct?
no, there was not.
Relevance.
Just a moment.
Yeah, no, that's sustained. Go ahead, sir, ask your next question.
There had not been any, at that point, any public outcry at all?
Objection, Your Honor.
Hold on, I didn't hear the question yet. Go ahead, sir.
There had not been any public outcry to place my client in any headspace that there was something that anybody was thinking that he did wrong, correct?
State what is the objection.
As to the relevance.
Yeah, that's sustained.
Joys of wet noise, white noise. The cameraman's not really good with the jurors and the oopsies doopsies. Note to self, if I ever get a courtroom, maybe like put up like frosted plexiglass to block the view of the jury from the gallery, because the gallery doesn't really need to see the jury either. I mean, you know, they don't really need to see them, so maybe put up a frosted plexiglass in front of the jury so that will block the camera. And it can be frosted so that you can see that there are people back there, so it doesn't have to be a wall. But yeah, maybe something like that. Note to self. Now, what I was saying as I was being rudely interrupted by the white noise is maybe if I get a courtroom, I could put up a frosted plexiglass between the jury and the gallery. So obviously the jury doesn't need to see necessarily, the jury doesn't really need to see the gallery either. That's not why they're there. They see the witnesses and stuff like that, right? So you put up a frosted plexiglass that blocks the view between the jury and the gallery. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to be, it just has to like block the width of the jury box, so you know you don't have these problems. And it can be frosted so that you can see that jurors are there, but not necessarily so the jury can't see the gallery, which is probably for the best anyway, because they're not supposed to be reacting to anything that happens in the gallery. So it solves that problem, and also there's no particular reason for the gallery to be able to see the jury, and also it blocks the camera shot, so it solves all kinds of problems all at once. So some sort of frosted plexiglass is sounding better and better with every passing moment. Some gallery members like the people watch the jury. Yeah, well, they'll be sad in my courtroom, I guess. Sorry about that. Sorry for all the body language expert people who want to be able to watch the jury, but no, that's not happening. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're in your disappointment. Your disappointment is noted, and I don't care. You get to see the witnesses. You get to hear their testimony. You don't get to see the jury. Fuck you. Yeah. You can see that they're there because it's frosted. So you can see the jury's there, but you don't get to see their faces and stuff. Fuck you. So there's Kurt. There's uncivil laws and view of the situation. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe if you sit like on the far end, you can, right? Because it doesn't have to block the whole jury box. So it only block the people like basically on the one side of the gallery. So if you're a body language person, I guess you have to really vie for those front seats on the far end so you can see in from the angle or something. So if you really want to see them, then I guess you have to vie for those premium seats. Otherwise, fuck you. End of legal analysis. All right, let's turn back on the audio now that we're back and doing this.
He didn't have the benefit of reviewing any reports before he gave his statement, correct?
The only thing he brought was some paperwork that he had on Nicholas Cruz from the school.
That's it. But nothing regarding, anything else, correct?
Well, I think one of them was an official report that he had been involved in with Nicholas Cruz, but that's the only report I remember.
Okay.
But not.
Yeah,
my
in this
investigation,
setting, the
Correct.
witness
So
would
he
be
had
able to see the
no
jury.
reports
Yes, the
yet
witness would be able to see the
regarding
jury.
what happened on
And the
the
jury
day
can
in
see the
question,
witness, yes.
correct?
No. Not that I'm
Nor,
aware of.
nor
I mean,
was
the
he
jury
involved
needs
in
to be able to see the
reviewing
witness.
videos, correct?
That's like one of the principal
So he
points. So
comes in
yes,
there
the
and
jury
he
can see the
answered
witness.
every
So if the
single
jury
one
can
of
see
your
the witness, yes, the
questions,
witness can see the jury.
I believe so. Yeah, I'd have to go back
Yes.
and look. I don't remember any he couldn't answer.
In other words, he didn't refuse to answer any questions,
Oh, no.
correct?
No, he did not.
He should have. He should have kept his damn
And
mouth
you've
shut.
been in law enforcement for decades. You've become a pretty good judge of character as to whether you're seeing somebody who outright looks like they're lying to you, correct?
Oh Lord, what a question.
The relevance as to his judge of character when somebody is
Well,
lying.
that wasn't the specific question. As to that question, it's overruled. Go ahead, sir, you can answer.
Could you ask it again so I get specifics?
For decades, you've been interviewing people, right?
43
You
years.
generally can get a sense when somebody is lying to you, correct?
What I end up doing is I listen to what people say, and then I evaluate through an investigation whether or not, I try not to be so open-minded that, I believe I'm clairvoyant and I can tell if somebody's telling the truth.
At no
Yeah.
point, while you're speaking with my client for the time that he was with you, did you think right then and there, gosh, this guy's lying to me.
Frosted glass is sounding better and better with every passing moment. We're doing some frosted glass in my courtroom. I'll pay for it
You
myself.
tell my client that you're conducting this interview in a chronological order, correct?
Yes,
And that means you go from the beginning, and then you say, and then what happened after that, correct?
well, it's kind of reverse chronological, from the day of the shooting, then backwards with Nicholas Cruz's background.
That's correct. The interview that you conducted of Nicholas Cruz, which lasted for hours, how long was that transcript? How many pages?
I have no idea.
I mean, hundreds, correct?
Again, I have no idea.
This was merely 36 pages, correct?
Yes.
And up to page 16 is
Better
all
colors?
that
You don't like my
discussed
color scheme?
about what happened that day, correct?
What's wrong with my color scheme? It looks great. You don't like it? I think it looks
15,
good.
16, where we start going into the background.
Right. So from page 17 on, all the way to the end, there's no discussion at all about what happened on the day of the shooting, correct?
Towards the end, when I make that comment, is there anything
You don't like the
else
courtroom?
about
I think it's
the day of
fine.
the shooting or?
A little
Other
brown
than
on
that
brown,
one
but it's all
question,
right.
There's nothing from page
I've seen
17
worse.
to 36 where you discuss any further details about what occurred on the day of the shooting. Isn't that correct, sir?
Not particularly that I can recall, but I'd have to read every page. I know we talked about the fire alarm and protocol and what to do a fire alarm versus an active shooter situation, but that was more a general questions rather than the day of the
In
incident.
fact, at the top of page 17, you start off with Cruz. All right, how long have you known Nicholas Cruz?
Yes.
You shift your
The
discussion.
colored
to
light
him,
in my
correct?
courtroom I can change for each witness.
Yes.
I don't think I'm going to be
So
doing
let's
that.
focus on the first 16 pages.
No.
Okay?
Okay.
And one of the first thing that he tells you is that
But we'll see
prior
if
to
we can do
hearing the
something other
fire
than
alarm,
brown.
Scott was in his
Surely
office
lecterns come in other colors.
researching a statute concerning a student who had a fake driver's license.
See if we can do something a
Isn't
little
that
bit more
correct?
modern.
What page are you at, just so I can refresh my memory? I know he said he was doing some fraudulent driver's license investigation.
Okay, you remember that, correct?
Yeah.
In your research, did you find that that was the truth or a lie?
Objection, Your Honor. That's opinion.
That's the thing.
Okay. Did he tell you that the student's father was coming to the campus and he was going to meet with him? Do you remember him telling you that?
I'd have to look at the page, that sounds accurate, but if you have the page number, I can refresh my memory as we go.
Okay, my question is, do you remember him telling you that?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay.
But we could go full like
I think he said something, he may
light
have
boards,
contacted
you
him on
know,
the
just
phone.
change everything into
I
one
think
massive
I
LED and turn it into basically like a marshmallow
He tells you that he was in building
show
one
or something.
prior to the fire alarm going off.
That'd be good.
correct?
Yeah, I believe he said he was in his office, which is in building 1.
Okay. And that is quite a distance from the 1200 building, isn't that correct?
It's probably 2 buildings.
And when he tells you that he was in the administrative office in building 1, you were able to confirm that by watching the video, correct?
He was near the 100 building, was not, as I recall, he was not in it, he was down towards, I think there's a cafeteria down there, that area.
Is it your statement that he wasn't in the 100 building and then went out of the 100 building?
I just remember him being in the hallway,
Okay.
and as he approached going to the 1200 building, there's a golf cart which would have been in front of where his offices were, but he was not in that office.
And when he tells you that that Andrew Medina drove him and Greenleaf to the 1200 building, you confirm that on the video, correct?
Again, if you have the page number, I know that's what happened based on the video. I
Okay.
don't recall him actually saying that.
Someone could
I know he
be,
said he didn't see the golf cart originally that he normally gets on.
that's correct. Somebody could be inaccurate, but not necessarily be a liar, correct?
Sure.
In other words, if he tells you that he didn't see someone leaving the 1200 building during the shooting, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's lying about it, correct?
Objection, speculation, and opinion.
Yeah, that's sustained as to both.
Are you familiar with something called tunnel vision?
Yes.
Tell the jurors what tunnel vision is.
Tunnel vision, and again, this is my interpretation of it, is usually when
The
you're
volume is what we have to work with. We have no
involved
more.
in an encounter where
We
you're
can't fix the
personally
volume
under
levels. I'm
stress,
sorry.
as in a policeman, where you're being
I
fired.
have no
upon, where
power.
Vision becomes tunneled where you don't see outside that quote tunnel.
Okay. And so, in other words, things could be blocked in the periphery because you're focused, laser focused on something right ahead of you, correct?
That's the term tunnel vision, yes.
And you're familiar with the fact that a number of officers were going through tunnel vision while they're at the scene because this was very stressful, correct?
Objection, speculation.
Well, no, that's overruled, but I don't want you to guess, or if you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question.
Unless you can show me a statement that says that, I don't recall anybody saying that to me personally.
Okay. And what about auditory exclusion? Are you familiar with
I
that?
definitely can't do anything about the
yeah,
relevance of this
term as
witness.
well.
That is
Okay,
well
tell
beyond
the
my
jury what
power. I could at least
auditory exclusion is.
hypothetically fix the
That you
audio
will,
issues.
Again,
The
under
relevance of the witness is
my
well beyond my
terminology is
ability
you're
to
the
control.
officer
That
being
is
fired upon.
totally a
Sometimes
total
you may not
non-starter.
hear, certain things that are occurring.
There were a lot of people who didn't hear all of the shots fired, correct?
Objection, relevance, hearsay.
It's sustained as to hearsay.
Did you interview people to determine how many shots they heard?
Yes.
Did anybody say they heard all 140 some odd shots?
Objection, hearsay.
Well, yeah, that is hearsay, that's from an out-of-court statement, that's sustained.
You are familiar with the fact that the students on the third floor didn't even hear the shots on the first floor, correct?
Objection calls for.
You think Legal Eagle could fix the witness?
Did you watch the video
Okay.
of the students coming out into
Maybe.
the third floor?
Yes.
Did you note what their demeanor appeared like?
Yes.
That demeanor changed from calm, did it not?
Well, there's so many different students. Some of them went from calm to panic, yes.
Okay. And that panic occurred because the shooter went on to the third floor and began shooting, correct?
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Yeah, that's sustained.
Now, when you ask my client about how many shots he heard, there's one question that deals with that, isn't that correct?
There's one question, but multiple answers during the statement. He talks about how many shots he heard
You,
after I asked that question.
well, it's in evidence, so let's talk about it. Judge, if I can get this on, please. Page 9. You agree on page 9, at the very bottom. This is the first time you ask him, the question all the way at the bottom. This is the first time that you ask him about how many shots he hears. Isn't that correct?
No, but he answers above from the bottom where he hears the gunfire, but I ask him the amount on the bottom of the page.
Okay,
Yes.
so the first time you ask him about the amount, and the only time you ask him about the amount, correct?
Yes.
All right, so that question is, okay, you say, okay, all right. Once you get closer and you hear those guys, what guys were you referring to?
Read the paragraph before that. Again, I don't know what the guys refers to. I'd have to make sure it's an accurate transcription, which I believe it is, but I don't recall what guys.
Yeah, the attorney does seem to be on the wrong side of the judge. The judge is keeping it pretty fair. The lawyer's
I
definitely,
don't know what the guys
this
refers
lawyer's
to,
definitely trying
so I'd
the
have to
judge's
make sure
patience a
I'm
little
listening
bit.
to the actual audio statement and it's accurate, but I
I'm
don't
not sure if
remember
that's a
what guys it
personality
is.
trait problem or what, but
Those are your words.
he's being a little
That's the
trying.
transcription of what I asked, but the best evidence is the actual audio recording. So
So
I'd have
as
to
you-
listen to the audio recording.
As you sit here today, you don't know what guys you're referring to?
That's what I just answered, yeah, I'd have to listen to the audio recording.
You do say, all right, okay, you get closer and you hear those guys. How many rounds do you think you've heard?
Yes,
And his answer is, it wasn't many, 2 or 3. That was his response, correct?
yes,
And isn't it a fact that 2 or 3 is the exact number of shots that went into Aaron Fikes? Isn't that correct?
2 went into Aaron Fice, yes.
Okay, so that was accurate. If he's referring to when he arrives at the building and he hears the shots fired, 2 would have been accurate, correct?
Objection, counsel testifying as to what is accurate and what is inaccurate.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So this is the only time in this deposition, strike that, this is the only time in this statement that you ask him how many shots that he heard, correct?
So the time I asked how many shots, yes.
Isn't it a fact that at no time do you say, how many total shots did you hear from the time that you arrived to the time that you hear no longer any shooting?
No, I did not use the word totally. Again, he
The perjury charge seems
talked about
pretty
it
thin.
later in his statement to clarify.
It seems pretty thin,
was
guys,
telling
on the
me.
perjury statement, because the question's a little ambiguous. And like, okay, so,
Is it
I
your
mean,
testimony
this is
That
perjury,
at no time do you ever think?
because like,
to
as
say
you're
how many
approaching the
total
guys,
shots
it's
did you hear?
implying a time frame.
It was very clear from my question to him
So-
and his answers to me, what we were talking about is he only heard 2 to 3 shots.
But then the very thing that he said, that you say after he says it wasn't many.
Don't talk to the
2
police.
3, the next question you say is, okay, all right, what happens from there? Right?
Yes,
You weren't asking total number of shots. You were saying at that point when you're by the building. Isn't that what you were referring to?
absolutely not. We're talking about shots being fired, what he heard. Because a little further down, he actually clarifies it again.
Bullshit.
In
Bullshit.
retrospect, do you think that asking how many total shots fired would make it clear for everyone?
No, because again, think it was very clear in the interview what I was asking, and based on his answers several times during the statement, it was very clear he understood what my question was.
You've read the dispatch transcript to know exactly what my client was saying in real time, correct?
Yes,
He initially reports shots fired at 2:23:26, correct?
I'd have to see the timeline on the time, but that sounds accurate.
You do remember him again saying additionally, when there are additional shots fired, he gets on the radio and he does announce shots fired, correct?
Yes, and I believe you can actually hear the shots going off.
Did you ever, as part of your investigation, ever speak
This is such
to
a thin thing to
Anna
hang a
Ramos?
perjury charge on.
His name
You,
sounds
like,
familiar.
this is what you want to hang
Yes, I believe
perjury
so.
on?
Jeffrey Morford
Yes,
to confirm that they heard
Ah.
my client order a code red?
the police response part of the investigation was not conducted by me, but whether I asked them that, I'd have to look at the statements. It may have been in a statement somebody else took as part of the secondary investigation of your client and the
Right.
other responding deputies.
If the jury finds for perjury, I'm going to be a little salty. I'm just saying. Because this is some thin bullshit on perjury.
I want to cover some more of the statements. My client is doing a diagram for you, correct?
I believe we had a map of the school.
And he was trying to assist you by drawing things out, correct?
Yes, or pointing out with his finger.
That wasn't included in this packet, correct?
The state brought, no, I didn't see it in the
Okay.
evidence.
I don't
It's
really
not-
think
can
this
you just take a
perjury
look?
charge works.
That drawing that
I'd
you did,
strongly
that's not
consider
part of
dismissing
what's
the
in
perjury
evidence there,
count.
correct?
Well, again, I recall it
Because
being a map.
it's
I don't
so
want to refer to it as a
thin.
drawing, but no, it's not in evidence.
Do you believe that he was
You're really having to push
assisting you
this.
as he was drawing for you?
He was helping clarify certain things, at the school locations.
My client gave you the
Go
name
talk to the
of the
police.
student that he was investigating who possessed the counterfeit license, correct?
Yes.
Did you investigate to determine whether that was accurate?
Again, that would have been part of the other response investigation by Inspector Riddick. Once I took this statement and the outside video came back from Quantico, I had no further follow-up on that type of this
He
investigation.
does give you her name, Marisol West, correct?
Yes.
Now, 2 days after the shooting, my client is telling you that he thought the shots were outside of the 1200 building, correct?
I think he made some, and I haven't looked at the page, he said it was really close.
Right.
That those shots seemed like they were outside.
Okay.
And that was the 2 to 3 he was referring to.
Yeah, I think the defense attorney is pretty grating at times. Yeah,
He did tell you
he's a little grating
very
at times.
loud, correct?
Yes.
Maybe I have to
He
downgrade
tells
him to
you
7.
that he got about 10
Maybe it's
feet
playing better
from
in the
building,
courtroom than it is to
correct?
us, though.
Yes.
And that's when he
No.
heard the gunfire, correct?
I believe that's accurate, yes.
He tells you that he didn't get the opportunity to
But
actually
it's a little
open up
grating.
the door
And sometimes
before
he
hears
feels
the
like
gunfire,
he's really
correct?
trying to extract something.
I don't remember that
What
exact
seconds worth
terminology,
it.
but I don't think he said anything about opening the door, no.
I'm trying to be nice, Robert.
You asked him specifically
Trying to
if
be nice.
he saw any muzzle flashes, correct?
Yes,
And he tells you, no, he didn't, correct?
that's correct.
Was there any evidence that you discovered of any muzzle flashes that were visible to anybody watching the building when the shooter was on the second or third floor?
The only evidence that I had which prompted that question was the impact to the second floor windows. So that's why that prompted that question.
Okay. And he tells you that he locked down the campus. He didn't want anybody coming onto the campus, correct?
Yes, that's what he did.
Did he indicate to you it's because he felt that it would be unsafe for people to traverse in that area?
I'd have to look at exactly why he did that, but that's what he did.
You're trained also to keep people out of a crime scene, correct?
Well, once the crime scene is secure, yes.
Okay. He tells you that he's speaking on both of his radios, the school and the police radio, correct?
Yes.
And he indicates to you that after he announces the code red and the shots are fired, he realizes
order the
that
code
he
red?
is vulnerable.
Remember, I don't
He's out in
do
the
it.
open, correct?
First time I did it during the stream, and I, had to,
Page 10. Middle of page 10.
yeah, sorry.
Yes, he's saying he's yelling for a lockdown code red.
Okay. He's also telling you specifically, no, that's where I realize that I'm out in the open, in the middle. So then I go back, right at the corner of the 700 and 800 building, I go back. So he explained to you that, correct? That came from his mouth, correct?
Yes.
So he makes the transcriptions. He announces on his radios before he takes a position of cover, is what he's telling you, correct?
Yes.
And the video confirmed that that's exactly what he did. Isn't that correct?
Well, again, the video shows him on the radio at the 700 building. I don't remember seeing the radio as he's running from the 1200 building to the 700
The
building.
video doesn't show it, but you see him delayed getting to the 700 building, correct?
I don't remember much of a delay. I remember him leaving the 1200 building pretty quickly, getting to the 700 building.
Okay.
And I don't remember any radio.
Did you speak to Kelvin Greenleaf?
I personally did not. I know detective, or I keep saying detective inspector or special agent Riddick did.
You're not saying that you have evidence that my client didn't get on his both school radio and police radio prior to taking cover at the 700 building?
I'm just telling you what I can recall from the video, and I don't recall him being on the radio when he retreated from the 1200 building to the 700 building. I remember at the 700 building, clearly you can tell he's on his radio.
Now,
I'm just trying to be accurate on what I can remember.
I hate A Few Good Men. I hate the
you also
movie.
have the dispatch
I hate the
transcript
movie
to know
on many different
that
levels.
Literally, 1 second after Feist is shot, my client is on the radio announcing shots fired.
If you
I
show me the
particularly hate
transcript
Demi
to
Moore's
refresh my memory,
character.
I'll certainly do that.
He also tells you that my concern was because I didn't know if the shots were coming out of the building. He brings that up to you on page 11.
Jessup did nothing
Another
wrong.
one of his concerns
Hashtag free
was that he
Jessup.
thought maybe shots were coming out of the building.
Yes.
And my
that's-
concern was because I didn't know if the shots were coming out. That was another one of his concerns that he expressed to you 2 days after the shooting, correct?
Well, that's part of the statement he made, but yes.
We'll keep going, okay?
Just want to be accurate.
Or were they coming somewhere out of the west side? That was another one of his concerns, correct?
Yes.
Because the west side is where Aaron Feist was shot, correct?
Again, we're going to go east and west. West is, the school is the most eastern building, the 1200. The 1300 building to the football field.
Feist was shot on the
I
opposite
know
side
exactly where Aaron
of where
Feist
he was
shot.
at, correct?
I know exactly where Aaron Feist
Over
was shot.
73.
Hold on. Madam Court Reporter can only do one voice at a time.
Thank you, Judge.
One voice at a time, so the witness, The lawyer will ask a question, stop talking, the witness will answer the question, and then the witness will stop talking, then the lawyer will ask another question. Go ahead, sir, ask your next question.
Feist was shot over 73 yards away from where my client was. Isn't that correct, sir?
When your client first got to the 1200 building, that is correct.
And then here he is again saying on page 11, because it sounded like it might have been even outside, correct?
Yes.
And he explained, that's why I went back to the corner at this point, correct?
I haven't seen Law and Order since the reboot, but at least in the first 20
Your
seasons, which
training.
I saw all of those, they did a
And again,
reasonably
we're
good
talking about
job
training before 2018.
with legal
before this.
accuracy.
Your training,
Not so
if you
much
believe that you're
on how things would
potentially
actually play
going to be
out,
harmed with gunfire,
but
you're
they
not
did
trained to just stand out in
reasonable.
the
It's
open,
not.
correct?
It's better
You're also trained not to
than
retreat
many
from cover.
depictions.
I understand.
Yes. Okay. Just trying to be accurate.
But you are trained, are you not, to take a position of cover when you think that you might get hit with bullets, yes or no?
Yes.
Like, the Law and Order, like those things wouldn't happen is the biggest thing. Like, a detective wouldn't do that. A
He
witness
tells
wouldn't
you
testify to that. They
that
wouldn't say that.
I'm keeping
Like, so
cover on the
it's
east side of
scripted.
the building, to keep them covered with my firearm
But,
directly towards the doors, possible with an anticipation of maybe if the shooter or whoever it was, which someone maybe was going to come out of this door. Another one of his concerns was there might be a shooter or shooters coming out of the doors of the 1200 building, correct?
Yes.
That was one of the possibilities, correct?
Yes.
He never narrows it down to say, I knew there was a shooter or shooters definitely in the 1200 building, correct? He never does that in his 16 pages of discussing this incident, yes or no?
No, not specifically. He talks about the 1200 building, and then he says those other things we've just testified to.
Right. And then he tells you about waiting, and he sees an officer running right up in the parking lot, up to a tree right over,
Yes.
right? That turned out to be accurate, correct?
Yes,
There was an officer, that was Officer Burton, wasn't it?
that is correct.
Burton never, you learned, went into the 1200 building, correct?
That is correct.
Burton was with Carl Springs, correct?
That is correct.
Burton had additional information above and beyond what any BSO officer had, correct?
If he had his radio on, I would assume so, yes. I never interviewed Officer Burton personally.
He says right here, it was Carl Springs, Tim Burton, who was an SRO, correct?
Yes,
And Tim had a long gun on him, he tells you, correct?
that's correct.
And again, you're still doing this in a temporal sense, right? What happened next? What happened next? Chronological. Because you say on page 12, all right, what happens from there? Correct?
Yes, yes.
And he tells you that he's telling him, he's referring to Burton, correct?
Yes.
I heard a couple of shots. Haven't heard anything since, and he's just taking over by, behind the tree. I'm taking cover here, and units are now starting. There was a 26-second gap from the time that he hears the first shots to the time that the second shots are fired, correct?
Again, that sounds accurate. I have to look at the timeline.
And you don't know when it is that my client hears the next round of gunfire, correct?
Not based on a statement, no.
In fact, the last 2 minutes of the 4 minutes and 15 seconds of the shooting occurred when the shooter was on the west side of the 1200 building, correct?
He comes up on the east side and he travels westbound.
Yes.
And then he abandons his weapon and goes down the west staircase.
Correct. So the last shots fired were from room 1240, the teacher's lounge. Yes or no?
Yes,
That's on the opposite side of the building from where my client is, correct?
yes. Well, no, again, he's opposite side from the part of the building where your client first went. Your client went to the 700 building, which was like a third of the way down the building now. So your client, that 700 position is actually closer to the teacher's plant area than he was at the east doors.
You're still talking at least over 50 yards at least.
I'm just trying to be accurate. I'm just, again,
Yes or no, it would have been at least 50 yards, if not more, correct?
I would say that would be close to being accurate.
And the last 2 minutes of the shots fired by the shooter,
This is the
Nicholas
thinnest
Cruz,
perjury count.
came out of the teacher's
Man, this perjury
lounge,
count
room
sucks.
1240. Yes or
I
no?
can't even
sir?
believe they
Say that
brought
one
it,
more
to
time.
be honest. I mean, the reason they
last
brought it is to
2
just
minutes
paint him as
of
a
shots
liar.
Fired by
For
Nicholas
that like
Cruz
extra bonus.
came
But
out
on the law,
of
I mean,
the
give me a break.
1240 teacher's lounge. Yes or no?
I'd have to look at the timeline. I don't think that's accurate. He fired 10 rounds out of that room, and I don't remember it being 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Isn't it a fact that he began shooting at 2:25:34 and he stopped firing at 2:27:35 out of the teacher's lounge? Yes or no, sir?
Okay, I'd have to look at the timeline for the exact times, but you were accurate about the last 10 rounds came out of the teacher's planning lounge. Yes.
And he's assuming a position.
Why
of
not just put up a
sniper
picture
fire,
of
is
the
he not?
room? Why not just put up
Because
a
he's
picture of it
shooting at
to
kids
show us
and/or
where it is in the
cops
building?
Out the window.
Just
Yes
put up a
or
picture
no?
of the building. Be like, here's the teacher's lounge. Here's where he was. How about that?
The last 10 rounds.
And the active shooter policy states, does it not, that if you believe you're dealing with sniper fire, you are to isolate, contain,
I'm
and
hungry.
wait for SWAT. Isn't that correct? Yes or no?
I'm gonna make myself a
Again, I'd have to look at the
breakfast
policy.
sandwich.
I know the active
Be right
shooter
back.
policy goes, you have to
Talk
go
amongst
to the
yourselves.
gunfire, and it doesn't say specifically if you think it's a sniper that I recall, but if you show it to me, I'll read it.
I will.
Thank you. And if that's, usually it's if he's barricaded, you call for SWAT.
Well,
But if he's
let me ask-
actively killing people, no. I would say that's inaccurate.
You don't believe that he's barricaded in the teacher's lounge?
Barricaded and still shooting is a whole bit different ballgame from barricaded and not shooting. Barricaded with a guy in a gun, you call SWAT, because he's no longer hurting or killing people. If he's in a room and he's acting as a sniper, you still have to go up there and get him and stop him.
If you know where he's at, first of all, correct?
Well, you gotta find out where he's at. That's what we're supposed to do.
That's right. The first units, he tells you, are saying there's someone over by the football field, correct?
Yes.
He hadn't been able to review the dispatch transcript to know that there were officers like Kratz who said shots fired by the football field, correct?
Yes. That's
So
correct.
that turned out to be completely accurate, correct?
Yes.
And again, he's telling you that he's making it very clear. In my mind, I was kind of, is he maybe running towards that? Maybe he's not even in the building. He might be somewhere way out over here. I mean, in my mind, I obviously didn't know, where the shooter was. And I started wondering if he had fled westbound at that point, because they're talking about people injured near this football field, which is quite a distance from the building. You remember when he told you that, correct?
Yes.
And the football field is quite a distance from the 1200 building, isn't it?
It's on the, again, we're gonna go northwest corner of the campus, yes.
There's literally hundreds of yards between the 1200 building east side and the football field, yes or no?
Yes.
He does tell you that he assisted when someone came over and asked for keys, correct?
Yes.
And he didn't keep the keys from them. He immediately gave those keys to be of service, correct?
It doesn't say time frame. He says he gave the guy the keys who asked for them.
Okay. And you understood that to mean that he was being of service to somebody who was asking for the keys, correct?
Yes, he gave the keys to the 1200 building doors to whoever the SWAT personnel wanted.
And you determined that to be factually accurate, correct?
I didn't personally take the statements from those people, but yeah, I read the statements where that was accurate.
And he made it very clear to you too that he gave the keys because he wanted to make sure that they had access to the classrooms, correct?
Yes.
And that was to specifically help the people in the 1200 building, correct?
Yes.
Do you know the name of these 5 kids who allegedly came out of the 1200 building?
Again, that was part of the secondary investigation, which I was not a part of. All the police response part of the investigation was done by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So I don't know.
Keith Riddick, correct?
Well, he's just one of them. He was the main agent. I don't know their names, no. I'd have to go back and look at these reports.
There's no evidence that any of these kids came running towards my client and gave him any real-time intelligence, correct?
I'd have to look at his investigation because I did not interview any of those people. So I can't answer that. I don't know what they said when they were interviewed.
He tells you, does he not, that he ordered Assistant Principal Jeffrey Morford to go to the video room, did he not?
Yes.
And the purpose, he tells you, why he did that was to try to find out where the shooter or shooters were located, yes or no?
Yeah, well, that's logically, I believe, why he did it. I don't remember him saying it, but yeah, that's logical.
And that turned out to be true, correct?
Yes.
And you were able to confirm that when Jeffrey Morford and Greenleaf were reviewing the video, that was being relayed to my client by the school radio, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And you also confirmed that then my client was announcing what he was being told by Jeffrey Morford, correct?
Again, I'd have to listen to the radio transmission, how Nicholas Cruz's name first came out, whether it was over Coral Springs, because by that time I think we had uniformed people got their way down to the administrative building and were actually in the room when the video was being played back, is the way I recall it. So I don't remember whose radio it came across when I heard it. I just heard Nicholas Cruz's name come across the radio.
So my question is, did you investigate to determine whether my client was on the scene announcing what he's hearing over his school radio that was coming from Jeffrey Morford? Do you have any first-hand knowledge of that?
I'd have to look at the radio transmissions. I don't recall him actually saying Nicholas Cruz over the radio.
Well, we're talking about over the school radio.
We don't have a transcript of that. It was not
Exactly.
recorded.
So did you speak to the witnesses who were around my client to learn whether my client was conveying that information over the school radio that he was getting from Jeffrey Morford?
Objection, calls for Peterson.
No, that's a yes or no question. It's overruled. You can answer that question.
Again, the police response investigation was not conducted by me, so I did not interview any of those people.
That
I'd
was
have to look at Keith Riddick's investigation to see if he did and what they said.
It turned out, you learned, that the information that my client was getting from Jeffrey Morford was old. It wasn't accurate, correct?
The information that they were putting about him coming down from the 3rd to the 2nd floor was 20 minutes inaccurate, yes.
That wasn't my client's fault, correct?
No, I don't believe so, no. Because, again, I don't remember your client putting that out.
And at this point, there's no question that the BSO police radios were useless. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but can I go back to that last question? Because now I remember how it came out. It came out through Sergeant Rich Rossman, who was standing aside of a Coral Springs guy and a Marjory Stoneman Douglas staff member who heard he's coming down from the 3rd to the 2nd floor. That's who put it out over the BSO radio.
Right. You know
Rich
where they got
Rossman.
that information from?
The control room?
And who was the control room speaking to?
Again, I don't know, because I didn't do those interviews.
Gotcha. You're not saying it wasn't Scott Peterson who was speaking to Jeffrey Morford on the school radio. You just don't know, correct?
No, because it's not recorded. And I didn't conduct those interviews because that was part of the investigation into the police response.
That Keith Riddick did.
That the Florida Department of Law Enforcement did, yes.
Yeah. And He tells you that he was given a description by Jeffrey Morford, who was watching the video, and that description was of a subject who was wearing a male, wearing a burgundy shirt, black pants, and black hat, correct?
Yeah, what page are you on, sir?
I'm on page 16 of 36.
Okay.
You remember him telling you that, correct?
Yes.
And and you asked, and you got that description from a vice principal, and he tells you yes, right?
Yes.
And you say, watching the video, answer correct.
I'm ready for this cross-examination to be over now.
You confirm that to be accurate, correct?
Yes.
When my client tells you that he announced over his police radio, "Get the school locked down, gentlemen," you later confirm that by seeing on the dispatch that my client did in fact do that, correct?
Yes, I remember him. That part I do remember him saying over the police radio.
And you noticed that he asked for the lockdown or demanded the lockdown about 5 times over his police radio, correct?
Again, without having to review it all, I don't remember how many times. I know he asked for the roadways to be blocked. He asked for the parking lot, keep people out of the parking lot.
Yeah, because school was letting out, right?
Again, the terminology of why he was doing it, I don't know.
But you did know that this happened in the afternoon,
Oh,
right
yeah, it
before
was right.
school was letting out, correct?
Exactly. Sure.
And you do know that parents,
Please stop talking.
kids would then be coming onto campus any moment, correct?
I would assume so, yes.
And it's consistent with training then to keep those people out of an area where they then may get hit with bullets. Isn't that correct?
In this case, in my opinion, it was the absolute wrong thing to say to the responding deputies, because it was an active shooting situation, still in progress.
It turned out to be, in retrospect.
Right.
But when my client's there, not knowing where the shooter or shooters are located, and he feels that parents and kids may be harmed, training tells you to keep them away. Yes or no?
No, that's inaccurate. He told the officers to block Holmberg Road. Some of those officers actually heard the shots being fired, and that direction was a complete contrast to what those officers should have done. Those officers hearing those shots should have rushed onto campus as well.
Did you know whether those officers thought the shots were coming from the 1200 building or somewhere else?
They had no idea.
They didn't, correct?
But they should not have been setting up a traffic post. They should have been coming on campus to find out where they were coming from. And that's what protocol and police work in general tells you to do. They were given the wrong direction.
He doesn't lock down the school. Parents and teachers come, and then Cruz shoots and kills them.
Objection, Judge.
I haven't even heard a question, Mr. Agash, and quite candidly, I'm at the end of my patience with this type of examination. So if you have another question
I do.
that ends with a question mark,
Yes.
you may ask your question.
You said that you checked the transmissions that my client made in real time, correct?
But yes, I've looked at the transcriptions, yes.
So you were able to verify that at 2:28, my client is announcing to BSO, over his BSO radio, the last time we heard shots was between the 12 and 1300 building, correct?
I'd have to look at the timeline to see the exact time he said that, but I do remember that.
You also remember him in real time asking Deputy Perry
Thank you for the
if
nice,
he knew where the shooters were located. correct?
Emojis for those
Yes,
guys
I do recall
on
that.
their phone with
And
the,
then
that's
18
nice.
minutes after he first announces that the last time we heard shots was between the 12 and 1300 building. He again repeats that. Last time we heard shots was between the 12 and 1300 building, correct?
I'd have to look at the timeline for the time frame. You're saying 18 minutes. I don't recall him saying it the second time. I remember him saying it the one time, yes.
Okay, you're not saying he didn't say it again. That's easy.
That's why we
to
do these
check.
timelines. If you give it to me to refresh my memory, I'll refresh my memory. I don't remember the exact times on everything on that timeline.
Judge, if I might have a moment.
Sure.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Oh, thank God.
You're ready.
Yes, Judge.
Go ahead.
Detective Crusoe, were there any windows shot out of the 1200 building?
They were impacted. I wouldn't describe them as shot out, but they had been impacted by rounds on the second floor
Did any of them?
and on the teacher's planning area.
And did any of them shatter?
They partially in the teacher's planning area. They didn't shatter. The fragments got out of the third floor teacher planning area and ended up on the roof of the 1300 building. But the window,
That's facing the football field, correct?
yes.
Okay. And did Scott Peterson ever use the word sniper with you?
No,
Did he ever tell you that he was receiving fire?
no.
Explain the distinction between an active shooter and a barricaded subject.
Again, an active shooter, again, is somebody who is actively shooting and or killing people. On an active shooter scenario, one of the goals in trying to stop an active shooter is to get him to barricade himself, where he's no longer doing harm to anyone, but he's contained in an area where he's not killing people. He's barricaded. You block all the entrances so he can't escape, and then you call in the SWAT boys with all their specialized equipment to get him out.
Now, you said one of the goals, and earlier you disagreed with the term kill the killer. Why?
The goal is to stop him from killing people, excuse me. And that doesn't mean killing him. It means slowing him down. It means distracting him. It means anything so those kids can find safety.
Oh, a little emotion there at the end.
Because again, the goal is to try to stop him from actively killing people.
No, finish with a little emotion there. Tug at the heartstring a little bit at the end.
Retreat from cover was something that you said. Can you please explain what you meant by that?
If you have cover, you don't run across an open area to try to determine what's going on. You have cover. You try to determine what's going on from a position of cover and then move towards where the threat is.
When he said may have been outside or really close, what building was he referencing?
1200 building.
And now he admitted to you that he threw the keys from his position outside. He never entered the 1200 building, correct?
No, he did not.
And when he told you that he gave his keys to SWAT, that was after the shots had stopped being fired, correct?
That is correct.
He didn't do any of those things that he told you, and he didn't tell you in his interview that he did those things while the shots were happening, did he?
No, he did not.
Now, the problem with the radio was, as you put it, on how many people were trying to key up. Is it fair to say that the radio issues occurred after the shooting had stopped, once the shooter had left the building?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
And the problem with the radios, explain where the radios fell on your priority list while you were on that scene.
They were lower on my priority list because we were trying to get an active intelligence from anybody who was on the scene when the shooting was occurring and where the suspect or where the victims could be located.
And that's because the person hearing gunfire is the source of active information, active intelligence, correct?
Yes, he's one of the best sources.
I'm sorry, say that again.
He's one of the best sources.
And the whole radio, who's giving information to who when someone's listening to active gunfire? Who's the source of real-time information? Who's supposed to be using the radio?
Well, the person on scene who's the closest to what's occurring is the person in command. It's not a question of rank. It's not a question of position. It's the person with the most pertinent information to lead the rest of the responding people to what's going on at the scene.
Aaron Feist, and according to defense counsel, was shot at 2:23:25. While his client was standing outside the 1200 building, did you confirm that those shell casings showed that Aaron Feist was actually shot on the west side of that building?
Yes,
And at that time, Scott Peterson was standing on the east side of that 1200 building.
that's correct.
And according to his own attorney, for 4 minutes and 15 seconds, his client stood there while gunshots were going off.
Actually, he moved from the 1200 building to the 700 building position for that period of time.
And after retreating from where those gunshots are happening, he then remained in that position according to himself, the statement you took and the surveillance that you reviewed, correct?
That is correct.
And during that time, the shooter was on the second and the third floor while Scott Peterson was standing outside.
You see what the prosecution did there?
Actually,
In contrast to
he
the
was
defense
standing
lawyer,
outside
the
the
prosecution
700
didn't get
building.
exactly the answer she wanted
Outside.
when she asked.
70,
He stood there for 4
away.
minutes and whatever it
And
was.
so that was the 2 to
And he's like,
3
no,
shots
actually,
that
this
killed Aaron
happened,
Feist, the 6
and she
rounds
moved
the second
on.
floor, the 61 rounds
So she didn't
on the
highlight
third
the
floor,
she didn't
so that's
highlight
70
that she
rounds,
didn't get the
all
answer she
while
wanted.
Scott Peterson
She just
stood
moved on to the next
outside
question.
Of the 1200 building after retreating
Yeah,
to the 700
the juice
building.
wasn't worth the
Is that
squeeze. It
correct?
wasn't worth
That is
correcting.
correct.
So she moved
And
on.
he told you that he
Something the
heard
defense lawyer
2
could
to
learn
3
a little
shots.
bit from.
That's correct.
You said it was very clear to you that he meant that he heard only 2 to 3 shots. Why was that clear to you?
Because during the statement, he reemphasized that once he got to the position at the 700 building, he heard no longer any shots being fired, and it got quiet. And I've actually heard him make the same statement of 2 or 3 shots to other people.
Judge, objection, hearsay.
It's overruled. It's a statement from the defendant. Go ahead, Ms. Gomes, ask your next question.
Just a moment, Judge. Just one final question. When else did you hear him say that he only heard 2 to 3 shots?
In interviews.
Judge, objection, you can go sidebar.
Thank you so much, Detective Christie.
Nice. He won that objection. Good for him.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're cross, go ahead.
Prosecutor just asked you about the best source of information on the scene. The best source were the kids who called in to 911, isn't that correct?
Yes,
Because
it would have been one of the best sources for the Coral Springs response.
Because those kids precisely knew where the shooter was located, correct?
They knew where he had shot people, yes.
They also knew that kids and adults had been shot, correct?
Yes.
That information never was relayed during the
Hey.
shooting to any
Anyone here from
BSO
Legal
officers.
Vices? Glad that you're
Yes
joining
or
us.
no?
Objection, speculation.
Thank you for joining us here on Civil Law. We do appreciate everyone who's here. The state's witnesses have been lackluster.
Response that I remember was Coral Springs tried to transfer calls from those students to us and never got to us.
So it never happened, correct?
No, the transfer of the calls never got to BSO's dispatch.
And we talked about Burton, but my client and Burton weren't the only ones standing around. And by that I mean taking positions of cover. Best was there, Coral Springs Officer Best, correct?
Yes,
He didn't go into the 1200 building, correct?
not that I can recall, no.
And there were other officers who also remained in a position of cover and didn't go into the 1200 building, correct?
Many of those arrived afterwards, yes, but that's correct.
And many of them heard shots as well and didn't go in, yes or no?
The only ones that I recall heard shots were the BSO ones that were positioned on Holmberg Road blocking the roadway.
People like Miller.
I don't remember Miller's name, but there was 7 of them, I believe.
And you, sir, you never went into the 1200 building, correct?
Not until after I arrested Nicholas Cruz.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack, if I could just have you remain 1 second. State, do we have time to start your next witness?
Yeah, all right, this time to stay rest.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the state haven't rested their case. There's some matters that I need to handle with the lawyers, so I'm gonna send you a lunch. It's gonna be a slightly longer lunch. I'm gonna have you back at the normal time, which is 1:45, because there's a few things that I have to handle with the attorney. So, with the same admonition as always, please don't discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. If you'll leave the notepads in your chairs, they will be waiting for you when you come back. I hope you have a nice lunch.
Case is
I will
thin,
see
man.
you at
Case
the
is
jury
thin.
1:45 p.m. to 7.
Case is thin. I don't think they can make out their case, really. I think it's thin. Thin is what I say. What am I trying to do right now? Oh yeah, I'm trying to reschedule this afternoon stream for 45 because he just told me the time. Did he say 12:45? He said 12:45. No, he couldn't have. What time is the court coming back?
Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated.
May I just run to the bathroom for 2 minutes?
Well, yeah, but I'm gonna let Ms. Gomes is here. Yes, you can go to the restroom. I had sustained the state.
1:45, so that's 12:45 my time. Okay, thank you. I got confused. I'm trying to do like 2 different things at the same time, so
The witness, we're outside the presence of the jury.
actually like 3 different things at the same time, so I got a little confused. Thanks. 12:45. All right, so I rescheduled this afternoon stream.
One of the primary
Okay, great.
reasons why you interviewed my client at all was because your supervisor asked you to.
All right, now I was trying to post a video
Sergeant
for
Jonathan
this
Brown
afternoon,
brought,
so I'll go back to doing
he's the one
that.
who made the arrangements for Mr. Peterson to come down. So, yeah,
And that was done because family members inquired about what my client was doing during the shooting, correct?
that was the one reason Jonathan Brown wanted him to be interviewed, but I was interviewing him for my purpose as well.
Okay, that's what I would have asked him, Judge.
No other questions?
Trying to think of the other, honestly, I'm at a loss. I forget what else there was that had been sustained, Judge, so.
Okay. State, based on that, any questions that you would like to ask outside the presence of the jury?
No, Judge.
Okay. State, is the detective excused?
That's
All right, sir, you may step down. Thank you very much.
Um,
So while he's doing that, the state having rested their case, I'm inclined to just send you all to your lunch break now. As soon as we come back, I'll hear any motions on behalf of Mr. Peterson. I'm not prejudging anything, so then we'll take it from there based on those. Mr. Aguilar, is that okay if we handle those motions after the lunch break?
Yes, Judge, thank you.
State, anything you need me to take our lunch break? No. All right, so we're otherwise going to be in recess. I hope y'all have a good lunch. I'll see you at 1:45. 1:45 p.m.
Okay, court's in recess. I'm going to ask everyone to please exit the courtroom. We'll see you all at 1:45.
Download that. Download that. Great. All right. I'm still trying to create a thing for now. Okay. All right. Great. So that brings us to the end of the stream for the afternoon and the end of the state's case. So my assessment, I think trying to make perjury out of this is impossible. The question isn't specific enough. It's obviously time frame limited in its question and what he thought he was being asked. And there's just not enough to prove what he did or did not hear. And it's just making out perjury is impossible here. I mean, no, just no. On the perjury count to me, I that seems ridiculous. On the also don't talk to the police. On the underlying issue, I think the state's case is thinner than was advertised. They said, I believe, more than once that they would be able to show that the defendant essentially cowered behind a car for 40 minutes, and they didn't show that. They showed the defendant arguably not doing different things at segments in time, and they want you to connect the dots. They want you to connect the dots, which, okay, fair. He's not doing something at this point, not doing something at this point, not doing something at this point, not doing something at this point. Therefore, he wasn't doing anything in between. Yeah, okay. I mean, you can draw the inference. There's enough there technically. But it's not what the state sold me on, or at least not my perception of it, right? I was convinced we were going to see a tape, or then when he got the guy on the stand, it's like, oh, it's going to be the confession. That's what it's going to be. We're going to get the defendant saying, yes, I hid behind a car for 40 minutes. Well, look at me, I'm a coward, right? But we didn't get anything like that. We didn't get anything like that from the statements. We didn't get it. So what we got basically are little pieces in time at best. So I think, and we do have the defendant doing things and are arguably similar to what other people were doing at the time and all the rest of it. So, okay. So, but, there's certainly no evidence of him entering the building. No one saw him enter the building. No one saw him trying to engage. No one saw him running towards the shot. No one saw him, and obviously Nick Cruz was there doing his shooting for some extended period of time while he was there at the scene, and it went on for a long time, and he didn't appear to fire any shots. So, there's no evidence of shots fired by him. There's no evidence of him being wounded. There's no evidence of any, teacher or staff member or student seeing him in the building trying to find the shooter or stuff like that. So I think the state has made out a prima facie case in that the defendant was not doing what he was supposed to do, right? It's not the case that what he was doing was not optimal. It's that he wasn't really doing much of anything. And he was allowing the shooting to go on for extended periods of time. And so I think they kind of made their prima facie case, but it's thin. And also it's less than they sold me on. So, they under-delivered. They overpromised and under-delivered, which is not where you want to be. Right. So it was a problem. And the perjury count is just completely ridiculous. So in terms of the defense, I don't know what we plan to hear. And I don't know if we plan to hear from the defendant himself. But I think to some degree, we might have to put the defendant on the stand, because I don't know that we can get what we need out of other witnesses. I have known defense lawyers, the general consensus among defense lawyers is that it is a bad idea to put the defendant on the stand. I have known lawyers to argue it's as far as malpractice to put the defendant on the stand because of how bad an idea it is. I'm not sure I go that far, but I will note the general consensus. I will also note the general consensus is that if you can get your testimony from someone other than the defendant, it's really nice, because obviously those people are significantly less interested self-interested than the defendant, right? The defendant is ultimately very interested in not going to jail very much or suffering whatever penalty. So, both for the sake of not putting your own guy on the stand and for the sake of getting it from someone who inherently is more credible, unavoidably more credible, you want to get someone else on the stand if you can to testify to what you need. The problem here is I'm not sure that that's possible because I'm not sure that anyone else can really provide what we need, which really goes to what the defendant and his state of mind, right? No one else can testify as to the defendant's state of mind except him. You know, they can testify as to if there are people who witnessed him doing things that the defense has. So if they have people that saw the defendant rendering aid to a specific student or trying to evacuate students or things like that, that would be helpful. But ultimately, I think you have a problem because you really need to get to the defendant's state of mind. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you experiencing? Why did you take the decisions you did, in the fog of war? I don't think anyone else can really explain it except the defendant. So I don't know that we really have much choice here except to put the defendant on the stand. But, once the defendant's on the stand, of course, they're going to cross-examine him about all the things he didn't do and talk about all the shots he didn't hear and walk him through the timeline in a very excruciating manner. So tactical risk, to be sure, very risky, but I'm not sure it's avoidable here. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can get what they need. Maybe they've got enough. Then they don't need to put the defendant on the stand. But I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this rolls. So yeah. So we are off for an hour and 15 minutes. This should automatically dump you into this afternoon stream if I set it up right. And so when you get there, please remember to like the video and also retweet the new link, which I've also provided in the new chat. And we will see how the defense, what witnesses they have, and whether or not the defendant himself testifies. The defense lawyer has certainly gotten a lot that's very valuable to them for close. So they might try to go without putting the defendant on the stand. They might try to go without it because they were able to get enough things without the defendant on the stand. But I don't know. But then again, I'm not a seasoned defense attorney. So I'm not really in a position to adjudicate this one. Like I think either way they make the decision makes sense. And especially depending on this lawyer's personality, because maybe he's just someone who's very reluctant to put him on the stand. Also, of course, the defendant himself can also ultimately force the issue. So the defendant can be like, yeah, I'm testifying. There's nothing you can do to stop me. Ha ha ha. So it depends on Scott Peterson, at least to some degree as well. So we'll see. So I think the state's case, I think the state overpromised. I think the state underdelivered. I think the state relies too heavily on emotion. They rely too heavy by standing on the graves of the deceased children, which is a little tasteful. I mean, it's not tasteful. It is, standing on the graves of dead children is not great. And I think that they really plow heavy with the emotion and the damage and using emotion, which isn't an invalid strategy. But this overall, what I think I can say for the state case overall is that it overall is an emotion heavy case. And the facts are not where I would want them to be. This situation is obviously a lot different than Uvalde. In Uvalde, we have much tape. We also have a lot different factual situation. So I'm not sure about the law, but on the facts are a lot different than Uvalde. This guy's alone in an unknown environment. He's not equipped to bear. He doesn't have special equipment. He is, all the rest of it, as opposed to Uvalde, we're basically literally the opposite of all those things. So I'm continuing of the view that if there's any way to prosecute these people in Uvalde, prosecute them all and let God sort it out. Use anything you can get. I don't care. If you can't charge him with murder, fine. Charge him with, violation of official duties. I don't care if it's a fucking misdemeanor. Charge them all. It'll make me feel better. Find something, anything. I don't care at this point if they get community service. I just want their names to be branded as the fucking cowards they all are. I'll take what I can get. In Uvalde, I'll find something, anything. If I have to charge him with, dereliction of duty, some sort of misdemeanor or something, I'll do that. I don't care. So fun. Uvalde, were they school resource officers? I believe, well, yes, I think some of them were. Because I believe the school had its own chief of police. It's been a hot minute. I'm gonna say yes, some of them, I think. But I'm not sure about the entire situation. It's been a hot minute since I remember the facts of Uvalde. I think some of them might fall into the school resource officer category, but it's been a while. Anyways, I'm going to sign off. I'm also going to post a video now as well. So you can check that video out, 5 minutes, because it'll take me 5 minutes to finish it off. But I'm going to post a video now, and this should direct you to this afternoon's stream, and I'll see you this afternoon. Until later, my friends, I've been Uncivil Law. Cheers, my friends, and goodbye.